Chapter 246. It seemed that old Fong really had a lot of free time. A few months ago, he was still a rather shy man. When he talked about his beautiful wives, beautiful concubines, and big mansions, he would blush from time to time. Now, he was so free that he could tell dirty jokes in public. His mouth already had some of old Sun's kung fu. Now that the son-in-law had arrived, the crowd was too embarrassed to continue listening. They chuckled and scattered like birds and beasts, thinking to themselves that they had to pick a good time to call old Fong out for a chat. "Son-in-law, what's the matter?" Fong looked serious and became an upright man again. Li nodded. There was indeed something. Even if there was nothing, he had to find something for him to do. How could such a good person be so free? Fong and a few men went up the mountain to cut bamboo. Although they didn't know why the son-in-law asked them to cut bamboo, it was much more interesting than staying at home and telling dirty jokes. Li Yi went to the street with Rui. Since Fong wasn't there, Rui temporarily acted as his bodyguard. Other people were the personal bodyguards of beautiful presidents, but she was the bodyguard of the county lieutenant's beautiful sister-in-law. She had a face that people didn't dare to get close to. Before people got close, she would cast a cold glance at them and they wouldn't dare to get close anymore. In the future, she would definitely be like an iceberg president. With her by his side, he would be as safe as he could be. Of course, those who wanted to get close were mostly men, and their target wasn't Li Yi. "May I ask what this is, young master?" In a shop that specialized in red clay stoves, the old craftsman moved closer and looked at a few pieces of paper on the table. There were a bunch of pictures on the paper, and the old craftsman didn't understand them. The red clay stove that they used to eat hot pot at home was bought here. The old craftsman's skills were good. After using it for so long, there hadn't been any quality problems. When he planned to make a honeycomb briquette stove, he immediately thought of this place. In the winter, it was necessary to have a good stove. Li Yi planned to make a few more stoves and put one in every room. It was convenient to use water, and they wouldn't feel cold when they slept at night. This picture is from the front, this picture is from the top, and this picture is what it looks like from the inside. After spending a few minutes to teach the old craftsman how to look at the three-dimensional and cross-sectional views, the old man's eyes lit up and he was full of praises. "This is a good idea, this is a good idea." The old craftsman had worked his whole life and was very experienced. Soon, he could read the picture correctly. A few simple blueprints appeared in his mind as he looked at them from top to bottom, left to right. Although the drawing on the paper looked a little different from the stove in the shop, it was definitely a stove. The old man looked away from the drawing and said, "Young master, you want a stove, right? There are so many in the shop, big and small. You can choose one, there is no need to remake it." Li Yi smiled and said, "My stove has some special uses. I'll make it according to this diagram. There shouldn't be a problem, right?" The old craftsman was puzzled. Apart from cooking tea, what other special uses did the stove have? Besides, the drawing on the paper only seemed to have an extra ear compared to a normal stove. But since it was a customer's request, he didn't need to ask too much. "No problem, it will be done by tomorrow. Where is your residence? I will send someone to deliver it." After discussing the price with the old craftsman, Li Yi and Rui walked out of the shop. Now that they had a stove, they would find a way to get some honeycomb briquettes to make it warmer this winter. Fong and the others quickly came back with chopped pillars. Each of them carried a bundle on their shoulders. According to Li Yi's instructions, they opened the joints in the bamboo so that they could see from one side to the other. Fong resisted the urge to ask Li Yi what it was for. It would make him look ignorant if he asked too much. He would see it with his own eyes one day. The old craftsman was very fast. The apprentices in the shop loosened the things the next day. Because this young master had given them a lot of money, the few of them had to work for an entire night before they could finish it before dawn. Fong saw his son-in-law put the hollowed bamboo on the ear of the stove. He connected another section and made a hole in the window. The other end of the bamboo stretched out from the hole. The charcoal fire burned quickly. After a while, the room became warmer. More importantly, Fong stayed in the room for a long time, but he didn't feel dizzy or smell the charcoal. They also had a stove at home, but they only used it when eating hot pot. When they ate, they had to open the window and the door. Otherwise, they would feel dizzy after a long time, and their body would not have any strength. Zhu Zi had been complaining about the cold at home for the past 2 days. It was not enough to cover 2 quilts at night. He was annoyed by it. When he came out just now, he even kicked his butt. This child only lived a good life for a few days, but he had already forgotten all the hardships he had suffered before. In the winter of the past few years, how could there be 2 quilts for him to cover himself? The weather in the mountains was much colder than in the city, but didn't he still survive? Of course, he didn't dare to light the stove in the house at night. That thing couldn't be used at night. Every winter, there would be people who lit the stove and quietly died in their house. After falling asleep, they never woke up again. After staying in the room for a while, he felt that it was getting warmer and warmer. After he didn't feel any discomfort, he ran outside. There was still quite a lot of bamboo left, so he decided to go cut some more and make something like this for his own house. He knew the shop assistants who had just delivered the stove. He had bought a stove from that shop before, so he would go to their shop later and ask them to make one that was exactly the same as his son-in-law's. It was his own child. It was fine to kick him, but it was also distressing for him to keep freezing. With this thing, if this brat still complained of being cold, he would have to kick him again. Son-in-law, the room is much warmer. Xiao Huan no longer rubbed her hands. The copper pot on the stove was steaming, and the water inside was always hot. Son-in-law said that he would use this water to wash his face and wash his clothes in the future. The room became warmer, and he wouldn't feel cold in eldest Miss' arms when he slept at night. Thinking of these things, her eyes narrowed into a crescent. In the entire prefectural city, only her house had this thing. Son-in-law's ability was really great. This damn weather, it snows just like that. It's so cold. Late at night, the cold wind whistled in the mountains. A few figures pushed open the door of the abandoned temple in the mountains. They shook off the snow on their shoulders. The cold wind mixed with the snow poured in from the outside. They hurriedly turned back and closed the door again. In an instant, their bodies felt a lot warmer. The space inside the small temple in the mountains wasn't big, but it was still enough to accommodate dozens of people. The windows on both sides had long been blocked with wooden planks. The snowstorm outside was like a different world compared to the inside of the house. In the middle of the house, someone had lit a bonfire to keep warm. They weren't the only group of people in the temple. Whether it was the wanderers of the Jianghu, the escorts escorting goods, or the pedestrians hurrying through the night, they were all blocked by this sudden snowstorm. If you're cold, come over and warm yourself up. There were many people around the bonfire. They had originally wanted to find a corner to sit down, but someone said aloud, "Thanks." The people of the Jianghu had always been forthright. They didn't refuse and sat down in the seats that the other person had opened up. After sitting down, one of the men untied a water pouch from his back and handed it over. "Do you want to drink some?" The person opposite them was about to wave his hand to refuse when the man opened the water pouch. A strong aroma wafted out. He was stunned for a moment before taking the water pouch. He tilted his head back and drank a mouthful. He smiled and said, "Good wine. This is Qing and Prefecture's famous strong wine. It's just that it's too damn expensive," the man said with a smile. Brothers from the prefectural city. the man asked with a smile. The man nodded and said, "That's right. We were planning to go to Chuzhou City to run some errands. We didn't expect the snow to come so suddenly. We'll have to leave tomorrow." The man opposite them also introduced himself. He was also from the Qing and prefecture. He was in the business of escorting goods. Because of the snowstorm, he had to rest here for the night. They were all people of the Jianghu. After a short conversation, the atmosphere became lively. Chapter 247. For these people who often traveled the Jianghu, they were all brothers within the 4 seas. Most of them were forthright. After all, everyone had their fair share of difficulties. It was necessary to make friends. The fire was burning brightly. Someone brought some firewood from the corner and added it. The temperature in the room rose a few degrees. The Jianghu people talked about the Jianghu. After a few sips of strong alcohol to warm themselves up, they started to talk. It's not easy to transport goods on a snowy day. Where are you going, Brother Wu? The man took a few sips and sealed the pouch. This thing was expensive. If it weren't for the fact that he got along well with Brother Wu, he wouldn't have taken it out. After the short conversation just now, he already knew that the brother opposite him was called Wuda, and that he worked as an escort to transport goods for a living. Tonight, he was also delayed by the sudden snowstorm on the road. Chuzhou, Wu said with a smile. Not far. The man continued to talk about this topic. Although the escort business was arduous and had a certain amount of risk, compared to other jobs, the rewards were still very considerable. It's just enough to make ends meet. Wu laughed and said, "It's just to make a living. The 4 Seas escort agency has taken all the big jobs. We can only pick up the ones they don't want. We don't make much money on a single trip." The Han family's 4 Seas escort agency was famous in Qing and prefecture, and this man often heard of it. Thinking of a rumor he had heard a few days ago, he asked in confusion, "I heard that Senior Han of the 4 Seas escort agency issued a must-kill order against a woman a few days ago. Many people from the Green Forest wanted to establish a relationship with the Han family and go kill that woman. In the end, they were all killed." "What Senior Han? He's just a eunuch." A sarcastic voice came from beside Wu De. The man looked at the speaker and asked, "Eunuch? May I ask this brother, what do you mean by that?" The man looked at the man and was also surprised. "Have you not heard of the 72 evil warding swordplay of the Han family?" The man shook his head. He had never heard of the evil warding swordplay. "I'd like to hear more." The man cupped his hands and said, "The people of the martial arts world had a natural talent for gossip. Senior Han was quite famous in the martial arts world. Although there were some interesting anecdotes, they were far less explosive than what the person in front of him said." The man faintly felt that he was about to hear a secret that few people knew about. It was boring sitting there by the fire. Since there was nothing to do, the man slowly said, "The story starts from 20 years ago. She didn't know why, but she still felt a little cold last night, even though she had lit the stove yesterday and the room was much warmer." Li Yi woke up from the cold early in the morning. When he was putting on his clothes, he felt the cold wind blowing in the room. He glanced at the window and found that the opposite window was half open. He must have forgotten to close it when he slept last night. After a night, the stove must have gone out. Li Yi ran over to close the window. When he looked out, all he could see was a vast expanse of whiteness. It was snowing. He wasn't in a hurry to close the window. This snow came suddenly. Although the snowflakes floating in the sky were small, judging from the thick snow on the ground, he could imagine how heavy the snow was last night. The cold wind blew in from outside and immediately woke him up a lot. At this time, he didn't feel so cold. It was not the first time he saw snow. As a native northerner, he experienced such heavy snow several times every winter. At that time, he was still in the countryside. When he got up early in the morning, the mountains and fields were all the same color. Early in the morning, he and his friends went up the mountain with the dog at home to chase rabbits and pick up pheasants. The snow was thick and the rabbits couldn't run fast. The pheasants stuck their butts in the snow and didn't come out. Catching them was as easy as pulling carrots. Of course, in this world, it was the first time he saw snow, so he had a different feeling. He got up very early today. Rui and Xiao Huan hadn't left the room yet. He walked over and opened the door of the courtyard. Fong was sweeping the snow with a big broom. "Good morning, young master." Fong greeted Li Yi. His movements didn't slow down at all. He pushed forward like a human road sweeper. In his field of vision, many people were already busy. They had gotten used to waking up early all their lives. Other than naughty children, not many people would sleep even in winter. Li Yi turned around and saw the only set of footprints he had left in the courtyard. He felt very accomplished. This was a hobby he had since he was young. Every time he saw his own footprints in the white snow, he would feel happy for no reason. He grabbed a handful of snow from the ground and rolled it into a ball. He wanted to experience the feeling of snowball fights when he was young. At this time, a door in the courtyard opened. Seeing the figure walking out of the room, Li Yi threw the ball of snow out subconsciously. Bang! Lu Rui waved her sleeve and the ball of snow exploded in the air and scattered. Looking at Mississippi Lu's eyes that were full of fighting spirit, Li Yi ran out of the door subconsciously. He forgot to think before he threw the ball of snow. Was Mississippi Lu someone he could provoke? A few snowballs flew from behind and landed on his neck. Li Yi shuddered and sped up. Although Mississippi Lu didn't chase after him, Li Yi still planned to take a look outside before going back. Most people were sweeping the snow on the road. Not only in front of their house, but all the snow in their houses was swept to the roadside. A few naughty children who woke up early were already high. Snowballs flew everywhere. They didn't get angry even when they hit their heads. They grabbed a handful of snow from the roadside and threw it back. Not long after, their clothes were wet from the inside out. They stood by the roadside and shivered like a sieve. If he was seen by the adults, they would kick him a few times and drag him back home by the ear. He had to quickly change into a set of dry clothes. If he caught a cold, the cost of medicine was a small matter. If he were to fall ill, he would suffer for the rest of his life. After a few cries, the naughty children could not be seen outside. Li Yi strolled around and returned to his house. The snow in the courtyard had been swept into a pile. Xiao Huan was squatting on the ground and making a snowman. Mississippi Lu's snowman was already done. Li Yi took a while to distinguish it and vaguely recognized a human shape. Li Yi laughed. Under Mississippi Lu's unfriendly gaze, he took a few wooden shovels from the kitchen and walked to another pile of snow on the opposite side. He patted the pile of snow twice and made a rough shape. Then, he used the shovel to mend it. Some of the smaller parts were handled with his fingers. After a while, the shape of a woman appeared. Xiao Huan's snowman was already done. After looking at her son-in-law, she blushed and pushed down the snowman that she had painstakingly made. She ran to stand behind Li Yi and poked her head out to take a look. Rui Lu took a look and kicked her snowman away. A hint of anger appeared on her pretty face. Everything was afraid of comparison. Li Yi's was a real snowman. Hers was at most a pile of snow. Actually, she was wrong this time. A snowman should look like a snowman. A small head, a big belly, and a broom would be its arm. What Li Yi was making now was a snow sculpture. The artistic cells that he lacked in his previous life were all made up in this life. There were a lot of books on ice and snow sculpture in the library. After digesting a few books, making this thing was like drawing and writing. It was full of skill points and not difficult. In less than an hour, a snow sculpture that was half the height of a person was made. Time was limited and many details could not be perfect. However, it was the first time that Xiao Huan and Lu Rui saw someone who could make such a lifelike figure with snow. The woman stood there with a sword in her hand. Even the expression on her face could be seen clearly. She was like a miniature version of Second Mississippi. Xiao Huan looked at Second Miss and was a little envious. It would be great if her son-in-law could make a Xiao Huan. Of course, it would be even better if he could make a big miss. Lu Rui was no longer angry. Putting aside his intentions, she liked this snowman very much. Li Yi was also very satisfied with his work. After all, it was his first time making it. This level was already very good. After looking up and down for a while, he suddenly smashed the snow sculpture with his palm. It was like spending half a day building a house with more than 1,000 pieces of building blocks. After building it, he destroyed it with his own hands. For people with obsessive-compulsive disorder, the feeling in their hearts at that moment was extremely comfortable. The only thing that was not right was that after he smashed the snow sculpture, the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a little. Chapter 248. Fong walked out of the house gloomily and wiped his face. There was only a little bit of ash on his face, but it was immediately smeared evenly. His skin, which was not very fair, became 3 shades darker. Last night's snowfall was too sudden. Not to mention the pillars, even he himself was freezing. Fortunately, the craftsman had brought the stove over. He wanted to install it immediately. Once the charcoal fire was lit, the house would be warm immediately. In the end, he hugged the 2 bamboos and pieced them together for a long time, but he still couldn't make it like the son-in-law's house. In a rage, he kicked the stove. The stove overturned and the charcoal fell to the ground. It almost burned the pillar next to him. He was chased out by his wife with a broom. He shook his head. It seemed that this kind of detailed work was really not something he could do. He planned to go to the son-in-law's house and ask him how to do it. Before he entered the courtyard, a figure rushed out from inside and disappeared in front of his eyes in the blink of an eye. It was really a whoosh. The speed was incredibly fast. Fong was stunned for a while before he recovered. The expression on his face was still a little unbelievable. Just now, was the son-in-law. After getting the answer from Xiao Huan, Fong's heart was hurt a lot. He didn't know when it started, but the son-in-law was becoming more and more powerful. Fong felt that his role was constantly decreasing. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before he could only help cut the bamboo and run errands. Apart from the son-in-law, he received the most dividends from the outside business. Even if he stayed at home every day, he could still earn money that he couldn't earn in a year. Although it felt good to be rich, he didn't feel at ease taking the money. Seeing that her man came back from the son-in-law's house and quietly fiddled with the stove, Lucia originally wanted to mutter a few words, but she swallowed them. Although she didn't scold him often, and when necessary, she would use the broom to make him remember. But she knew how to behave. After so many years, she knew when to speak and when to shut up. She wouldn't ask too much about the things between men. At this moment, she could only sigh and silently clean up the charcoal pile on the ground. Li Yi ran from home to the street in one breath, gasping for breath. When he looked back and saw that no one was chasing him, he found a roadside stall and sat down to rest. He didn't know if it was because of the pat from his second great-uncle, but his old injuries were almost healed. His lower abdomen didn't hurt anymore, and he felt that his body was in a better condition than before he was injured. Of course, due to the fact that he had successfully cultivated his true qi, he seemed to have been a little complacent these 2 days. He had been too cocky in front of Mississippi Lu. He rubbed the part of his butt that was still faintly aching, and finally realized how big the gap between him and Rui was. There was still a long way for him to go if he wanted to turn over the situation and suppress second Miss Lu in a fair and square manner. At the moment, he still had to follow the principle of keeping a low profile. The next time he wanted to vent his anger, he would have to pick a time when she was not at home and secretly make a snow sculpture to smash. Today was indeed a little too ostentatious. He couldn't return home for the time being. Otherwise, he might end up like the snow sculpture just now, so he decided to take a stroll on the street. It snowed heavily last night, but there wasn't much snow on the main roads of the prefectural city. There was no need for the officials to supervise. Before the sun rose, people started to get up and sweep the snow in front of their houses to the roadside. The shops were even more active. After all, they still had to do business on a snowy day. Life wasn't easy, and one less day of business meant one more day of loss. At this moment, there were no more snowflakes falling from the sky, and there were fewer people on the streets than usual. In such cold weather, the best choice was to stay at home and not go out. He passed by the place that sold breakfast and bought 2 steaming hot steamed buns. The steamed buns here were said to have been sold for decades. The skin was thin and the filling was plentiful. The taste was also passable. After eating the 2 steamed buns, he no longer felt hungry. There weren't many people in the shops along the way, but there were a few customers in the taverns. They were the only taverns in the prefectural city that sold hard liquor. The boss behind them was Prince Ningfu, and it was the source of more than 90% of the family's income. As he strolled into a tiled house. No matter what time it was, there was no lack of people here. There were tea houses, taverns, brothels, and customers coming in and out. It was very lively. A few temporary brothels had collapsed under the weight of the heavy snow. The performers who relied on the brothels to make a living were cleaning up the scene. It seemed that they hadn't put much effort into building the sheds. Although they weren't sturdy, they weren't so fragile. The larger brothels didn't have this problem. When Li Yi pushed open the door and walked in, the storyteller old man's son was directing the people to rehearse Painted Skin. It would be performed in 2 days, and it was related to whether or not they would be able to eat in the future. They had to get out of bed before the sun rose, and they couldn't go back until very late. However, no one had any complaints. "Young master, you're here. Miss Wan isn't here right now. I'll go get her immediately." Old man's son saw Li Yi and immediately ran over, smiling. After reading the follow-up storybook, his attitude towards Li Yi became even better. No need, no need. Li Yi waved his hand. He just came to have a look on the way. The old man seemed to think of something. He took out a small cloth bag from his bosom, which looked bulging and heavy. He said, "Young master, take this money. I asked some old friends to tell the Jianghu story you told last time. As expected, it's very popular among the Jianghu people. They sent this money here yesterday." Li Yi waved his hand again and said, "Give the money to Miss Wan. The brothels will open again, and the expenses will definitely be a lot. You keep this money." Hearing this, old man's son didn't say anything more. They really needed a lot of money these days. Old man's son was puzzled that Li Yi asked him to spread the good story through his friends, who were also storytellers. Most people in Jianghu were generous. Most of them gathered in the brothels outside the city. They were generous and liked to hear about the Jianghu. They would not be stingy with money when they heard it. It was a pity that they didn't keep a good story for themselves. At least they could exchange it for some money. It was a pity that Li gave it away for nothing. It was all money. Old man's son couldn't figure out Li Yi's intention, so he didn't think about it. It was not something he should worry about. He sent him out of the brothels and went back to urge those people to hurry up and rehearse. "Hey, old man, go on. What is the 72 evil warding swordsmanship exactly? In a temporary shack at the foot of the city wall, a man threw a small piece of silver into the jar in front of him and urged. The shack was not big, but there were many people inside. Most of them looked travel-worn. It was obvious that they were people who often traveled outside. After the man urged him to continue, the rest of the people also urged the old man to continue speaking with interest. Although the old man was old, he still had some eyesight. When he saw a flash of silver light into the jar, the wrinkles on his face bloomed like chrysanthemums. He cleared his throat and continued. The 72 evil warding swordsmanship of the Han family is really amazing. It is a legendary first-class swordsmanship, but few people know about it. First, this swordsmanship is never taught to outsiders. Second, the swordsmanship is fast and strange. No one outside knows the name of the swordsmanship. They only know that the swordsmanship is extremely fast and has reached an unimaginable level. Chapter 249. Hey, you old man, I told you that the Han family's Bixia swordplay is unknown. How do you know about it? One of them raised his doubts. There was no reason for a storyteller to know more about the martial arts world in Jianghu than they did. He had never heard of the Bixia sword technique or the world's fastest sword technique. He had only listened to it when he had nothing to do, and it was fine for him to have some fun. However, if it had anything to do with the real martial arts world, then it would be nonsense. Just as he raised his doubts, someone slapped him on the head. A tall man scolded, "Listen to the story. You talk too much." "Yes, old man, hurry up and continue. There have been such rumors in Jianghu these days. I heard that the Han family's Bixia swordplay is invincible. I thought it was just a baseless rumor. I didn't expect." Another person exclaimed. Everyone looked over. "Really? There's such a thing. This brother is right. I heard someone mention it the day before yesterday." The few people who were listening to this story as a way to relieve their boredom were instantly shocked. Although there were many rumors in the Jianghu, if there was no basis, the rumors would collapse on their own and not spread widely. Could it be that the Han family's Bixia swordplay was real? They heard that the Han family's disciples all used swords. The Han family's leader, Han Dazhong, was also known as the fast sword in Jianghu. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that it was possible. This time, no one rushed the old man. The few people of Jianghu gathered together and exchanged what they knew. The best swordplay in the world. Isn't that too exaggerated? If the Han family really had such a supreme martial art, wouldn't they have dominated Jianghu a long time ago? I heard that to learn this Bixia swordplay, there is a prerequisite. A voice paused and said, to learn this skill, one must first castrate himself. Rumor has it that in the entire Han family, only the current leader has mastered the Bixia swordplay. Castrate himself. Someone said in surprise, doesn't that mean that the famous senior Han is a eunuch? One of them immediately shook his head and said, impossible. Impossible. I heard that Senior Han had 5 wives and concubines. How could he be a eunuch? When everyone nodded in agreement, someone seemed to have thought of something and suddenly exclaimed, although the Han family's patriarch has many wives and concubines, he doesn't seem to have any children until now. This voice was like a bolt out of the blue, dispelling the fog in everyone's hearts. He had married 5 wives and concubines, but he didn't have a single child in the past few decades. This was very telling. Either there was something wrong with this senior Han, or he didn't have that thing at all. If they hadn't heard of these rumors, they naturally wouldn't have suspected the second possibility. However, at this moment, everyone thought of the same thing. If there was no such thing, why did he marry so many wives and concubines? Unless he wanted to cover it up. What exactly was the Han family trying to hide? How did Senior Han get his nickname of Swift Sword? Why had the Four Seas escort agency developed so quickly in the past 20 years and was about to become one of the most powerful families in the martial arts world? No one answered this question, but everyone was well aware of the answer. No, it's not that he didn't have any children. Someone thought of something and shook his head. His only son committed a serious crime a year ago and was beheaded by the authorities. Do you still remember that Senior Han gathered heroes from all over the world to kill that woman a few days ago? I heard that Senior Han's only son was caught by that woman and brought to the authorities. I remember now. After Han Dazhong married and had children, his martial arts suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. He killed several powerful enemies and made a name for himself in the martial arts world. Could it be that he really, after putting all the information together and organizing it a little, they finally dug out a deeply buried mystery? The Han family's 72 styles of Bixia swordplay was unparalleled in the world, but the conditions to cultivate it were too harsh. In order to continue the Han family's lineage, the man surnamed Han castrated himself after marrying and having children. He married so many wives and concubines to cover up the fact that he castrated himself. Otherwise, why didn't his wives and concubines give birth to any children in the past 20 years when he was in the prime of his life? Bixia swordplay, the fastest sword in the world. Not long after, a few people walked out of the brothel and disappeared into the crowd in different directions. People came and went in the brothel. The old man told the story of the Bixia swordsmanship over and over again. It was a rare and good story. Those martial arts heroes were too generous. The earthen jar in front of him could be filled half in a day. He was afraid that in half a month, he could earn the money that he used to earn in a whole year. Old Sun was a good man. He didn't make friends with him in vain. He gave him the money-making story just like that. He couldn't take all of the money. He had to at least give half of it to Old Sunday, otherwise, he would be breaking the rules and would be despised by his peers. The circle of actors and actresses wasn't big. They traveled everywhere to make a living, so they naturally made friends. At this time, in the various brothels outside and inside the city, there were several storytellers like this old man. They all had the same idea as him. Anhe County, the Han family. Bang! The head of the Han family, Han Dazhong, had just finished listening to his disciple's report. He slammed the teacup in his hand on the table. His vital energy surged and the cup was shattered into powder. His face was as dark as water. Who is targeting the Four Seas escort agency and our Han family? Han Dazhong's voice was filled with uncontrollable anger. Within 3 days, the Four Seas escort agency had been robbed 5 times. Although the goods weren't robbed, a few of the escorts were injured. Their journey was delayed and the agency's reputation suffered a significant loss. Ever since the Han family gradually became powerful and made a name for themselves in the martial arts world, this was something that had never happened in the past 10 years. It was obvious that someone was targeting the agency and the Han family. I've asked the escorts. The people who came to rob the goods were all masked. Moreover, they did it at night. I couldn't tell where they came from. The young man in the hall said respectfully, "Master, should we increase the number of escorts? The agency's business has already decreased by 20%. If this continues, our losses will be too great." Han Dazhong waved his hand and said in a low voice, "No need. This time, you and your junior brothers will personally escort the goods. If anyone dares to rob the goods, bring them back to me. I'd like to see who has the guts to target our Han family." He had taught these disciples since they were young. Each of them had extraordinary skills and were far superior to ordinary escorts. They were usually the heads of escorts. If they escorted the goods together, they would definitely be safe. "Yes." The young man responded and was about to leave. Just then, another man rushed in from outside the door. "Master, something bad has happened. Junior brother Zhang ran into trouble while escorting the goods." All the goods were robbed and the escorts were all injured. Even junior brother was taken away by the robbers. The young man's expression changed. When he looked up, he saw the muscles on his master's face twitching uncontrollably. He was clearly enraged. "You've gone too far." A roar was heard, followed by the sound of tables and chairs falling in all directions. Chapter 250. The Jianghu had been eventful since ancient times. For hundreds of years, dynasties had come and gone, and the position of the country had changed. The Jianghu was also filled with endless disputes. A few days ago, Senior Han and Steward Zhao had stirred up a major event not long after it had ended. In less than 10 days, a new storm had arisen. The Han family, the 72 styles of Bixia swordplay, the 4 C's escort agency, these words appeared frequently in the Jianghu recently and could be heard everywhere. It was impossible to find out who had started this rumor. In just a few days, everyone in Qing and Prefecture and the neighboring provinces knew about it. Among this, countless storytellers in the brothels played a major role. The Han family's 72 styles of Bixia swordplay were constantly exaggerated. At first, it was only spread as an anecdote of the Jianghu. After discovering to their surprise that these things were very popular among the people of the Jianghu, countless storytellers seized the business opportunity. Overnight, many storytellers were born. For example, the Bixia swordplay was the most profound and mysterious martial arts in the Jianghu. The current head of the Han family had only understood a small part of it, but his martial arts were enough to dominate the Jianghu. If he could understand half of it, he could become a great grandmaster and laugh at the world. When he swung his sword, no one dared to disobey him. Someone patted his chest and guaranteed that he had seen Senior Han attack and instantly cut down a dozen people with his sword. But he couldn't even see how Senior Han had attacked. There were also people who focused on the 8 trigrams. In thousands of words, they analyzed why Senior Han had married 5 wives and concubines and still had no children. They proved that the saying, "If you want to practice this martial art, you must first castrate yourself." From a professional point of view, they analyzed how many levels of swordplay Senior Han had understood. In a short period of time, even many things about Senior Han when he was young were dug up, including his martial arts, enemies, friends, and achievements in his life. If there was a storyteller in Qing and Prefecture who could not tell the story of great hero Han's life in detail, they would be laughed at by all of their peers. The difficulty of making a living would instantly increase to hell mode. In short, the 4 C's escort agency became popular, and so did Han Dazhong. His fame in the Jianghu reached the pinnacle of his life. Not only the martial artists of the Jianghu, but even the common people also learned about the power of the Han clan's Bixia swordplay from the storytellers. They began to admire the peerless swordsman who could move unhindered in the Jianghu with just a single sword. However, as the leader of the Han family, he could not feel happy at all. Pa! The cup splashed on the ground. He didn't know how many teacups he had broken in the past few days. Just a moment ago, another disciple came to report that a shipment of goods had been stolen last night, and the Han clan had lost several hundred taels of silver. Moreover, from morning until now, the escort agency had not received a single shipment. Have you found out who did this? The muscles on Han Dazhong's face twitched, and his words seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. I've already sent someone to investigate, but there's still no news. The young man standing in the hall picked up the broken pieces of the teacup and shook his head. Everyone in the Jianghu knew about this matter, so it was impossible to find out who was the one who first said it. The most important thing to do now was to think of a way to stop the losses and restore the reputation of the escort agency. Useless, all of you are useless. Han Dazhong flew into a rage. He wanted nothing more than to find the despicable person hiding behind the scenes and tear him into pieces. Only then would his hatred be appeased. This rumor had directly put the Han clan and the 4 C's escort agency on the line. The goods they were escorting were stolen, and even the disciples who were escorting the goods outside were captured and interrogated about the Bixia swordplay. Not only did the disciples not know, but even Han Dazhong himself did not know what the Bixia swordplay was. It was the best swordplay in the world, and anyone who mastered it would be able to dominate the Jianghu. If the ancestral swift-wind swordplay of the Han clan was that powerful, he, Han Dazhong, would have become a grandmaster long ago and ruled the Jianghu. Why would he wait until now? The most despicable thing was that those people thought that he had castrated himself to become a eunuch, and married so many wives and concubines just to cover up his disguise. This made Han Dazhong so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The person who spread the rumor was extremely vicious. They must have planned this beforehand and investigated him thoroughly. Otherwise, there would not have been a rumor of him castrating himself. In his early years, he was accidentally injured in a fight. Although other aspects of his body were not affected, he lost the ability to carry on the family line. Thus, he regarded his son, who was born before that, as the only descendant of the Han family. Perhaps it was because of Su Zhang's excessive love and indulgence that caused his son to be involved in a murder case and be targeted by the authorities. He had wanted to use his influence to allow his son to hide outside for a few years and return after the rumors died down. He did not expect that before he could escape from Qin and Prefecture, he would fall into the hands of that woman. The only heir of the Han clan had been severed. He hated that woman to the core, which was why he had been so anxious to have someone from the Lulin kill her a few days ago. At this moment, the young man in the hall raised his head. A trace of doubt appeared on his face as he asked, "Master, is the Bixia swordplay real?" "Get out." It was one thing to be humiliated by others, but he did not expect that this good-for-nothing disciple would also stab him in the heart and doubt the authenticity of the matter. Wasn't it the same as suspecting that he, Han Dazhong, was a eunuch? Han Dazhong finally could not take it anymore. He pointed at him and scolded angrily, "Get out of here. This disciple takes his leave." The young man knew that he had asked something he should not have and immediately retreated. After walking out of the door and passing through a few long corridors, the panic on his face disappeared and was replaced by a gloomy expression. He cursed in his heart, "Old bastard, I've never seen him mention such a powerful martial art. My fellow brothers have never heard of it either. It seems like he has never treated these disciples as one of his own." He scoffed at the idea that if one wanted to practice the Bixia swordplay, they had to castrate themselves. As his disciple, he had served him for many years and naturally knew some of his secrets. Castration was fake, but there was no smoke without fire. The matter of the Bixia swordplay made him suspicious. He had long felt that his master had been holding back from them and had never intended to pass on the most powerful martial art to them. Did he want to take it with him to his grave? As he was thinking this, a servant came over and whispered, "Young Master Zhang, the fifth madam wants to discuss something with you." "Understood. You may leave," the young man said in a low voice. After looking around, he turned around and walked in a certain direction. At the same time, in the hall, Han Dazhong cupped his hands to an old man sitting across from him and said, "Brother Wang, long time no see. May I know why you have come to visit today?" The old man smiled and said, "I heard that the escort agency has encountered some difficulties recently, so I specially came to take a look." "Brother Wang is very considerate." Han Dazhong smiled and felt touched. Many friends had come to visit the Han family these past few days, but they all asked him about the Bixia swordplay. There were very few who truly cared about the safety of the Han family. The two exchanged greetings for a while before the old man stood up and said, "If you have any difficulties, don't hesitate to ask. My Wang family may not be as wealthy as your Han family, but we still have some assets. I believe we can help a little." "Thank you, Brother Wang." Han Dazhong cupped his hands again. With this thought alone, he would definitely go to the Wang family to express his gratitude after this matter was over. "You're welcome." The old man smiled and waved his hand. When he reached the door, he turned back and pretended to casually ask, "I heard that the Han family's Bixia swordplay is the best in the world. I hope to have a chance to experience it." The smile on Han Dazhong's face froze and the veins on his forehead began to bulge. An old servant ran in from outside and said in a panic, "Master, it's not good. 2 more shipments have been stolen." Pfft. Han Dazhong's face turned pale and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 251. The master of the Han family unfortunately fell ill. The Four Seas escort agency was temporarily closed and no longer accepted any escort missions. This was clearly an unnecessary move. After this incident, the business of the Four Seas escort agency plummeted. 5 out of 10 escorts were robbed. Who would trust them with their goods? After a few days of fermenting, the rumor had begun to develop in the direction of a myth. The Han family had a peerless sword manual. If one learned half of it, one could become a top-notch master and become famous in the martial arts world. If one learned 20%, one could become a grandmaster. If one learned 50%, one could sweep through the martial arts world, be invincible, and beat grandmasters. Almost everyone in the martial arts world knew of this rumor. The Han family sent many people to stop these rumors, but they could only use force to deter the storytellers in the brothel. After they left, what needed to be said would still be said. This was their livelihood. How could they not take advantage of this to earn more money? Although the status of the performers was low, the court had never convicted them based on their words, let alone the Han family. At first, it was just a thin layer of ripples. However, when this layer of ripples spread out in all directions with Qing and Prefecture as the center, countless unseen undercurrents began to surge in every corner of the martial world. The business of the Four Seas escort agency has stopped. More than half of the escorts left the Han family to make a living on their own. I heard that when Han Dazhong learned of this, he vomited 3 liters of blood on the spot. Now he has been bedridden for a few days. When Wu Er spoke of this, his face turned red and his saliva flew everywhere. He gulped down a mouthful of tea and said excitedly, "I've long disliked that Han guy. So what if he's good at martial arts? He can bully people just because he's good at martial arts. Now he's getting his just desserts." Although Wu Er did not know Han Dazhong, his elder brother was also in the business of escorting goods. The Four Seas escort agency relied on their numbers and power. These small escort agencies were often bullied by them. Not only were their businesses robbed, even the people were beaten black and blue. This was only one of the reasons. Han Dazhong was quite famous in the Wulin world, but he had nothing to do with the word chivalrous. What he did was to steal chickens and dogs, deceive the world to gain fame. In short, Wu Er had not liked him for a long time. This time, there was no doubt that the Four Seas escort agency had suffered a great blow. It was certain that they would suffer a great blow, and it was hard to say whether they could recover. In particular, when he heard that the man with the surname Han was bedridden due to anger, he felt very comfortable all over. Li Yi pushed the plate of broad beans in front of him, indicating for him to continue. Wu Er did not stand on ceremony. He pinched a few beans and threw them into his mouth, making a crunching sound. He said, "Nowadays, there are many people in the Jianghu who are plotting for the Han family's Bixia sword manual. Up until today, there are at least 3 forces that have started to move against the Han family." After drinking a cup of water to moisten his throat, he looked at Li Yi with some doubt and asked, "Sir, do you think Han Dazhong is a eunuch? Is it true that the Bixia swordsmanship can only be practiced by castrating oneself?" Seeing Wu Er's doubtful expression, Li Yi knew that he had achieved the effect he wanted. Even Wu Er, who had personally spread the rumor, had doubts about whether Han Dazhong had a penis, let alone others. In fact, before this, he was not completely sure whether this method would work or not. After all, the Bishia swordsmanship was only a martial arts technique fabricated by Old Master Jean. The disaster of the Lin family only existed in the novel, The Smiling, Proud Wanderer. What if the martial arts masters in this world did not fall for it? But at that time, he had not thought of a good method, so he might as well give it a try. The Lin family started off as an escort agency, and so did the Han family. The Bishia swordsmanship was said to be extremely fast. With a sword in hand, the world was mine. Han Dazhong's nickname was Fast Sword. It was said that those who were not good at martial arts could not see his sword clearly. To practice the Bishia swordsmanship, one needed to castrate oneself. Han Dazhong married 5 wives and concubines, but for 20 years, he did not have half a son. This senior Han was born to be a scapegoat. Art came from life, but it was higher than life. Old Master Jin's understanding of human nature was quite accurate. Li Yi thought that those people would not be interested in a martial arts that required one to castrate oneself. At least, they would not have such a strong interest. However, it turned out that for those who were obsessed with martial arts, becoming the world's #1 martial arts master was far more interesting than being a real man. The Han family was definitely finished. Ever since that senior Han gathered those Greenwood bandits and came to Willow Leaf Village to make trouble, their ending was doomed today. The temptation of the Bishia swordsmanship was too great. Those people would definitely try to get it. Of course, Senior Han was a hero with a strong temperament. No matter what torture those people used on him, he would not say anything. Even if he was beaten to death, he would not say anything. Even if he was violated by those people and lost his chastity, he would not reveal any secrets about the Bishia swordsmanship. No matter how they asked, Senior Han looked like he did not know anything. Those people would definitely be very disappointed. In order to get the secrets of the swordsmanship, they would probably use some other means. As for what the means were, it was not something that Li Yi needed to worry about. He pinched a broad bean and put it into his mouth. He did not know who made the spiced broad beans today. The taste was a little bad. However, he could not rule out the fact that his taste was a little picky. After all, Wu Er was eating it with relish. With a pot of tea, he could make a movie-watching set meal. The price was 5 copper coins for a small one and 10 copper coins for a large one. The price was fair and fair. As for the taste, he also prepared a few more kinds. The original 5 spices, the soy sauce, and the spicy ones were more troublesome. He did not know if the spicy ones existed in this world. Although he wanted to eat it, he did not need to look for it all over the world just to make a spiced broad bean. Cornell was a little spicy. Although it was not authentic, it was barely acceptable. How is it? Is it delicious? The girl named Xiao Zhu ran over from the side and looked at Li Yi expectantly. Li Yi shook his head. The girl's mouth immediately became flat. The taste is not bad. The girl's disappointed expression immediately disappeared. She asked happily, "Then how much do you think it should be sold for?" Li Yi pointed at the plate in front of him and said, "If the plate is a little smaller, it should not be a problem to sell it for 5 copper coins." The girl blushed and left happily. Her vanity was greatly satisfied that the broad beans she made could be recognized by Li Yi. Such a small plate could be sold for 5 copper coins. The brothel was going to open tomorrow. In the future, he could also make money. In the Han family, the famous senior Han in the martial arts world, the controller of the 4 Seas escort agency, the head of the Han family, Han Dazhong, was lying on the bed with an ashen face. In less than 10 days, the once prosperous Han family had become a mess. All the escorts had run away. The 4 Seas escort agency only existed in name. Only a few disciples remained. The Han family was finished. The escort agency was gone. Until now, he still did not know who was the one hiding behind the scenes to destroy the Han family. The threat from the martial arts world was still there. A sword manual that could dominate the martial arts world was enough to turn countless righteous sects that claimed to be chivalrous into bandits. There were many people who would take advantage of the chaos to attack the Han family. If it were not for the fact that he still had some prestige in the martial arts world these years, someone would have already come to fight. The door was pushed open and a young woman walked in from outside. Seeing the pretty woman, a trace of softness appeared on Han Dazhong's face. This was the fifth madam whom he had just welcomed into the family not long ago. These days, all his wives and concubines had run away and only the fifth madam was left. It often reminded him of his wife who had died young. Apart from lamenting, he was very relieved that the fifth madam had never left him. The fifth madam put a tray on the bedside cabinet and said while sitting in front of the bed, "Master, don't worry. Everything will be over. Xiao Rou, don't worry. I will definitely make the Han family rise again." Han Dazhong supported his body and sat up. He looked at the woman and said affectionately, "Yes, I believe in you, Master." The woman called Xiao Rou nodded and brought a bowl of black medicine from the tray over. She looked at him with the same affectionate eyes and said slowly, "Master, your health is more important. Master, your health is more important. You should drink the medicine first." Chapter 252. He took the porcelain bowl from the fifth madam's hand and drank it up. The medicine was very bitter, but Han Dazhong's heart was sweet. Only in adversity could one see one's true feelings. Of his wives and concubines, only the fifth madam was left. Although the servants in the mansion did not run away, these days, their faces were full of worry. If it weren't for the fact that they would be killed as escaped slaves if they ran away, the huge Han's mansion would have been empty long ago. In the past, if he stamped his feet, he could at least stir up a storm in Jianghu in the territory of Qing and Prefecture. However, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. When the wall is down, everyone pushes it. The small forces that used to be attached to the Han's family had drawn a clear line with them to avoid being affected. As for his good friends, after symbolically visiting the Han's mansion, they would vaguely mention the Bixia sword book. Han Dazhong had long given up the hope of asking them for help. Perhaps they had played a part in the Han family's current state. Fortunately, there were still people who were loyal to him. He glanced at the beautiful fifth madam and lay down on the bed. He had been in the martial arts world for decades, but he was so angry that he had to lie in bed one day. He had never been so weak in his life. Today, he didn't know why. He just got up for a while, but he felt sleepy again. His eyelids became heavier and his vision gradually blurred. The fifth madam smiled at him on the bed. Her smile was very beautiful. This was probably the last image left in the mind of the ambitious and ruthless Senior Han. Today, the brothel was very lively. The customers whispered to each other, and it was noisy. The only waiter who delivered tea was running so much that his legs were about to break. The broad beans made by Xiao Zhu had been sold out. It was a small plate of 5 copper coins. Often customers thought it was not enough, and they would give him 10 copper coins and ask him to get a bigger one. The originally open stage was hung with a curtain, which tightly covered the stage. The customers' eyes glanced over there from time to time. What was the painted skin stage? It caught their curiosity. Lin de Bao was the only waiter here. At the moment, he was a little nervous. His palms were sweating as he held the teapot. He had to be nervous. Grandpa's son and the others had been busy for so many days, waiting for this day. This was related to what kind of life they would have in the future. If they failed today, they would all have to leave tomorrow with their burdens on their backs. No, I can't think about it anymore. There are still a few pots of tea left. I can't let the guests wait anxiously. Wiping the sweat from my palms, I picked up the teapot and jogged over. As early as a few days ago, a large notice was pasted outside the main gate of the house. Whether it was passers-by or guests, everyone could see it. The content of the notice was very simple. On the first day of the 12th lunar month, there would be a performance of painted skin in the brothel. The location of the brothel was marked on a small map below, and everyone was welcome to come and watch. No one knew what a stage play was. However, they were no strangers to the painted skin. It was the most popular story in the brothel a few days ago. The content of the story was very exciting. It was said that it could stop children from crying. Even the most courageous man would shiver after hearing it. Even the security at night in Qing and Prefecture was a lot better. After hearing the story, there were fewer people walking at night. Although they didn't know what a stage play was, they were sure that it wasn't a dry story told by the old man. With the reputation of the painted skin, the first performance was almost full after the advertisement was put out. Li Yi sat in a remote corner, and Fong sat next to him. He was a little listless and didn't even have the mood to watch the play. Thinking that he had quarreled with his wife again, Li Yi didn't care too much. Suddenly, someone squeezed into the empty seat next to him. Wu Er came over and said in a low voice, "Han Dazhong is dead." These days, Wu Er was very concerned about the matter of Senior Han. He knew that the county magistrate was more concerned about it than he was. Once there was any news, he would immediately come to report. When the government received the report from the Han family servants, Han Dazhong was already dead in bed. It was said that he was poisoned to death. The entire Han family was turned upside down, and all the gold and silver were gone. The government found some clues on the same day. It was said that the person who did it was the fifth madam that he married not long ago. That woman had an affair with one of Han Dazhong's disciples and added arsenic to his medicine. The two of them took the Han family's belongings and fled. They are now wanted. Wu Er said in detail. In fact, these days, the Han family had been in the eye of the storm. No matter what happened, it would quickly spread out. He already has half a foot in the coffin, yet he still wants to marry a concubine. This is great, he didn't die in the hands of others, but in the hands of his own people. Regarding this matter, Wu Er was actually very surprised. According to the news he heard, in the Jianghu, there were already many forces that were ready to make a move. Their target was the Bixia swordplay of the Han family. In the end, before they could do anything, Han Dazhong died. This time, it was estimated that many people would be disappointed. According to the previous speculation, in the entire Han family, only Han Dazhong knew the swordplay of the Bixia swordplay, and he didn't pass it on to any of his disciples. After Han Dazhong died, the Bixia swordplay was naturally lost. After hearing this news, many people would beat their chests and stamp their feet, regretting that they didn't act earlier. In the following period of time, it was estimated that the Han family would be very lively. Han Dazhong didn't have any children, but he had a lot of disciples. Except for the one who ran away with the fifth madam, the rest of his disciples and wives would probably think of ways to divide the whole Han family. Of course, there would always be people in the Jianghu who didn't give up. That swordplay was miraculous. Wu Er was sure that if they could become the number one in the world, many of them would cut off that thing without hesitation. It was not enough for the Han family to be turned upside down. If they didn't dig 3 feet into the ground to find that thing, they wouldn't give up. Even Wu Er had once wondered in his heart whether that thing was more important or being the number one in the world. After struggling for a whole day, when he told his elder brother about his doubts, he was almost beaten to death by him. Since then, he had never thought about being the number one in the world. Li Yi had almost completely integrated into this world. The weak were prey to the strong, and only the fittest survived. Some people did things unscrupulously, and when they did something wrong, no one would punish them. This was wrong. From the beginning to the end, he had never thought about letting go of the surname Han. Since no one would punish him, he would do it himself. Yesterday, he fiercely slapped himself a few times to erase the thought of being the number one in the world from his mind. After sobering up, Wu finally realized that the evil swordplay, the number one in the world, was just a casual story told by the county magistrate. This story was spread out from his mouth. The Han family, which was a giant in his eyes, was destroyed and fell apart because of this story. Thinking about it, the origin of this matter was nothing more than the story that the county magistrate spent 15 minutes to let him remember in the room that day. Wu didn't sympathize with the Han family at all. On the surface, they were a senior in the martial arts world, but in fact, they did some petty things. The things that Han Dazhong had done were enough for him to die more than 10 times. Wu was a little excited to be able to personally eliminate this evil for the martial arts world. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned to look at Li Yi. He asked in a low voice, "Sir, Han Dazhong is dead. What about Squire Zhao?" Chapter 253. Fong looked at the man called Wu and the son-in-law talking in a low voice and felt very uncomfortable. Senior Han, the escort agency, the Bixia sword book, the conversation between the two could not escape his ears, but he did not understand what they were talking about. He knew that the son-in-law was doing something very important these days, but he did not know the specifics. In the past, the son-in-law would not hide anything from him, but this time, he did not have any intention of telling him. He looked like a man with thick nerves, but in fact, he had a meticulous side. The son-in-law did not need him to do things anymore. This fact made Fong feel very hurt, but he could not say it out loud. The programs in the brothel were not interesting. The curtain in front of the stage had been pulled back, and the audience could see the situation on the stage. A young man wearing a green robe appeared on the stage. As soon as he started, he bowed to the audience and said, "I am Wang Xing, from Qing and Prefecture. Everyone, greetings." Most of the people present had actually heard the story of the original painted skin. After Wang Xing came out of the story, they couldn't help but look forward to it. This stage play was really interesting. It was much better than just listening to the story. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from the side. Wang Xing turned his head to look and said to himself, "Whose family is this Xiaonyang's son? Why is he in such a hurry before the sun is up? Let me go up and ask." Li Yi watched from the corner. Everyone had a look of interest on their faces. It was clearly the first time they had seen this kind of performance. Without a microphone and sound system, it was destined that the brothel could not be very big. Moreover, the venue needed to be quiet enough so that the people in the far corners could clearly hear what was being said on the stage. Fortunately, the audience's professionalism was high enough. Perhaps because they had seen too many performances, they would not make a sound when they were not supposed to. Occasionally, they would disturb others and immediately become the focus of the people around them. After a few times, it was very likely that they would be thrown out. In terms of the effect of the performance, of course, it could not be compared to the performance of the future, but from the perspective of the present, it was already very good. Their preparation time was not short, and the props were very complete. There was even a background board at the back. A few large wooden boards were put together, and the wooden boards were pasted with paper. The paper was a three-dimensional painting. Sitting below the stage, it really looked like a real scene, and the impact was not small. Putting everything else aside, just this alone was enough to stun many people. There were already people below the stage gasping in surprise. Was the sky and sun at the back painted on? This painting is really similar. Yeah, the paintings are so realistic. This stage play is so much more interesting than those storytellers and singers. The three-dimensional painting was not drawn by Li Yi. There were only 2 people in the world who knew how to draw three-dimensional paintings. One was him, and the other was Lady Zuamo, whom he had met a few times. It seemed that Ruoqing had a good relationship with her, and these things must have been drawn by her. The creativity was not bad. Even Li Yi did not think of it at the beginning. To be able to make such a change showed that their thinking was not too rigid, and they knew how to make some changes. Painted skin was very popular in ancient times, and the erotic elements in it were a big selling point. Things like female ghosts and seductresses could attract these people the most. Wang Xing and that beautiful woman could do it every night, and it could satisfy the fantasies in their hearts. Of course, the scene of rolling in the sheets could not be acted out. Otherwise, the government would come to arrest them, and the lightest punishment would be a crime of indecency. When Wang Sheng and the woman fell on the bed, the curtain was drawn at the right time, causing a sigh of dissatisfaction from the audience. The curtain was quickly drawn again, and this time, it was a new scene. The wooden board behind was also changed to the scene of the market. Wang Xing met the Taoist priest, and the conversation between the two made Wang Xing suspicious. The scene changed again, and Wang Xing returned home to see the female ghost drawing skin on the bed. The makeup skills of the ancient people should not be underestimated. At least when he saw the female ghost dressed up by a performer on the stage, even Li Yi could not help but shiver. In order to set off the terrifying atmosphere, there was naturally background music at this time. It was the kind of music that gave people goosebumps. The person playing the music hid behind the scenes, and there were also some creepy strange sounds mixed in. Needless to say, in the entire brothel, there was no one else but Old Sun who could have such vocal skills. The door and windows had long been sealed, and the inside of the brothel was pitch black. In order to let them see clearly, candles were used on the stage. As the flames swayed, the horrifying face of the female ghost could be vaguely seen. There was a huge difference between hearing and sight. The feeling of listening to a ghost story and watching a horror movie was on a completely different level. Some people below the stage had already covered their eyes, not daring to watch. A burly man in front of Li Yi had his head almost stuffed into his pants. He could even hear the crying of a child not far away. Coincidentally, at this moment, the female ghost raised her head and looked down, and the audience instantly exploded. The curtain was drawn again, and there was a lot of noise. Old Sun and the others stood on the stage, their hearts extremely perturbed. That was the end of the show for the day. Whether the audience liked it or not, they really had no idea. The perturbed soon disappeared. After a short uproar, copper coins were thrown up like rain by the people without a care for their lives. Old Sun was hit on the forehead by a piece of silver, but he was not angry. He quickly picked it up and put it in his pocket. I'm rich, I'm going to be rich. Old Sun was not the only one who was excited. Wang Sheng was desperately putting money into a jar, and a piece of silver fell off the stage. The female ghost jumped off the stage to pick it up. The makeup on her face had not been removed yet, and her green skin looked particularly creepy. Fake fangs made of bamboo stuck out of her mouth. The man closest to her let out a strange cry and fell straight down. The people around him immediately hid 2 feet away. The female ghost picked up the silver and looked at them with a blank expression. Sister Ruoqing, so much money. The girl named Xiao Zhu stood on the side of the stage, holding Ruoqing's arm and shaking it non-stop. Her big bright eyes were shining. She had never seen such a generous customer. She even saw some people throw their jade pendants on the stage, which meant that their hard work these days did not go to waste. These people all liked the performance just now. Wan Ruoqing's face also showed a relaxed expression. Although she did not go on stage, she was in charge of all the rehearsals these days. At this moment, she finally saw the results. Li Yi did not go over to share the joy with them. The situation here was within his expectations. While Old Sun was busy picking up the money, he walked out of the brothel with Fang. On the way home, he passed by Her Royal Highness's mansion and was stopped by her. Although she lived next door, Li Yi did not see her at all these days. He did not need to think to know what she was busy with. He was really worried that if she accidentally blew up her precious body, would the emperor come after him? I'm leaving, Mingsu said directly. Where are you going? Li Yi asked subconsciously, but he was a little puzzled. Her Royal Highness could go wherever she wanted. Did she need to report to him? Back to the capital. Hearing Mingzhu's answer, Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and then a surprised expression appeared on his face. He could not wait to confirm, really. We are friends. Even if I'm really leaving, you don't have to be so happy, right? Mingsu looked at him with her arms crossed and frowned. Chapter 254. Of course he was happy. How could he not be happy? Her Royal Highness was leaving. What reason did Li Yi have to be unhappy? There wouldn't be anyone staring at him every day, trying to squeeze out his remaining value. Whatever he made, she wouldn't be the first to snatch it away, not even giving him a little reward for his hard work. Days without Her Royal Highness, he was like a bird that had escaped from its cage, a wild horse that had broken free from its reins. In short, his days were as comfortable as they could be. Who would want to live a life of being stared at every day? Li Yi looked at her expectantly and said, I'm a stranger in a foreign land. Every festive season, I miss my family more. Seeing that the new year is coming, I should go back and have a look. Oh yes, will you come back after you leave this time? Mingzu silently recited the 2 lines of the poem he had just said and said, if there are no accidents, I will come back after the new year. Come back. Li Yi's expression was hard to conceal the disappointment on his face. Mingzu looked up at him, do you hope that I will never come back? Li Yi quickly shook his head, no, no. There's still a month before the new year. There's no rush to go back. It's not too late to stay for a few more days. Then stay for a few more days. Mingzi nodded and said, Shen Liang made some changes to the formula of heaven's punishment. He's going out of the city to test it in the afternoon. You should come along. Mingzu turned and left after she finished speaking. Li Yi really wanted to slap his own mouth. Why did he have to say one more sentence when everything was fine? Mingzu was going to leave after all. As a princess, she couldn't be wandering outside during the new year. Whether she would come back or not, at least Li Yi would be able to relax for a while. Luck Square, Li Yi personally cooked a total of 8 dishes and a soup. Before the last dish was even served, Li Xian was already sitting there wolfing down the food. He didn't have the slightest demeanor that a member of the royal family should have. Mingzu did not move her chopsticks but continued to drink the wine cup by cup. In the past, he would hold the jar of wine in one hand and drink from it. Perhaps he wanted to leave a good impression before he left, but his actions today were much more elegant. Li Yi was a little gloomy. She was about to leave. Why didn't she set up a banquet to entertain her old friend at a high-class place like the Jade Courtyard of Drunken Fragrance Building? Why did she ask him to cook at Rui Workshop? However, seeing that he wouldn't be able to see her soon, he didn't want to bicker with her. For the sake of a better life in the future, what harm was there in working hard? Before the last plate of sweet and sour pork could be placed on the table, Li Xian's chopsticks reached over. When there were no outsiders around, this guy didn't seem to have received any royal etiquette. He was a guest at someone else's house. If an ordinary kid dared to do anything, he would have been beaten to death by his parents. At least he had a little conscience. He knew to leave some food on the table for him. He picked up a piece of pork tenderloin that had just come out of the pot and chewed it slowly. He couldn't help but sigh. His cooking skills were really getting better and better. Li Xian raised the wine in his cup and said, Mingzu Li will be leaving tomorrow. This cup of wine is to send you off. After saying that, he drank the wine in one gulp. His posture was very heroic, giving off the feeling of a hero in wine. Those who didn't know would think that his alcohol tolerance was very high. In fact, the alcohol in the cup did not exceed 10 degrees. Giving Li Xian a look of disdain, he picked up his cup and took a sip of the sweet grape wine. He buried his head and continued to eat. Mingsu Li was the real hero in wine. The wine jar beside her was the strongest alcohol produced by Rui Workshop. She didn't even blush after drinking a few cups. Li Yi, what do you want to do in the future? Mingsu Li seemed to have drunk enough. She put down the wine cup, looked at him, and suddenly asked. Li Yi was fighting with Li Xian for the last piece of sweet and sour pork tenderloin. After having true qi, his movements and reactions were much faster. Li Xian was no match for him at all and easily defeated him. Putting the pork tenderloin in the bowl, he said without raising his head, I never thought about it. It's good like this now. When I have nothing to do, I lie in the yard and bask in the sun, go to the brothel and listen to the opera. In the future, maybe it will still be like this. They were having a good meal, but they had to talk about their dreams. On this point, Li Yi had nothing to talk about with her. Their identities were worlds apart. Her Royal Highness liked to get rid of the tyrants and bring peace to the people. Li Yi didn't have such a big ambition. He was happy to have a yard with Rui to bask in the sun. Although he was not ambitious, he was happy to live in peace. He failed to snatch the last piece of sweet and sour pork tenderloin from Li Yi. Li Xian was a little disappointed, but after listening to him, he was a little envious. He didn't envy that he could bask in the sun in the yard, nor did he envy that he could go to the brothel and listen to the opera. He envied that he could do whatever he wanted, unlike himself. Basically, he wouldn't be allowed to do anything he wanted. His father didn't allow him to throw stones on the roof or trees, not even leaves. He didn't allow him to study those messy things. After the teachers left, they didn't hire anyone to teach him. Instead, they sent books to him every day for him to read. If it weren't for Mingsu, he wouldn't be here now. Li Yi's words made Mingsu unable to say what she had prepared. After a moment, she looked at him and asked, What if my father decrees to let you enter the court as an official? You're not really going to do that, are you? Li Yi looked at her with a vigilant face. It was 8 dishes and 1 soup. He had worked so hard to give her a farewell dinner. In the end, not only was she not grateful, but she also repaid his kindness with ingratitude. Were all princesses so unreasonable? Li Yi put down his chopsticks, looked at her, and said, Please spare me. You know better than me how complicated and dark the imperial court is. If I go there, I'll be swallowed up within a few days, and not even my bones will be left. I won't have to trouble you to collect my corpse. Being a county officer was the limit of what he could accept. He had never entered the court, but how could Li Yi not know that China had thousands of years of history? It was a place that devoured people. Li Yi didn't think that he could do better than those old foxes who had lived for decades. Those who could climb to that position were all shrewd people. That was his bottom line. If the emperor really wanted to do that, he wouldn't hesitate to run away immediately. He didn't have much sense of belonging to the Jing kingdom. It didn't matter where he lived. If he really couldn't do it, he could occupy a mountain and become a king. That was also a good choice. Anyway, his family had experience in doing that kind of thing. He could just go back to his old business. It was said that the Northwest was seriously affected by bandits. In the deep mountains, there were bandits and horses everywhere. The government couldn't reach there at all. At worst, he could go there and become a king of bandits. He didn't forget his original intention and pursue his original dream. Mingsu didn't know how to refute. She wanted to say that the court was not as dark as he imagined, but it was against her conscience to say it. She thought carefully. With Li Yi's character, he was fine in other places. Once he entered the court, he might really be eaten up like he said. That place was the battlefield of the rich and noble. There were no weapons, but it was more tragic than a real battlefield. It involved a lot of people. Even her father couldn't do anything about it. It would hurt him if he went to the court. Could it be that she was wrong from the beginning? Seeing Li Yi and Li Xian fighting on the plate again, Mingzu smiled complacently. She picked up the chopsticks and picked up the last vegetable on the plate. She was lost in thought. Chapter 255. What crown prince? Li Xian was drunk. With his alcohol tolerance, no matter how low the alcohol content was, he would still get drunk if he drank too much. He hooked his arm around Li Yi's shoulder and mumbled, "To be honest, I'm still envious of you. You don't have anyone to discipline you and you can do whatever you want. Why don't we switch? Swap your sister." Li Yi pushed him to the side. Everyone had their own difficulties. With the identity of the royal family, at least they would not be bullied by others. How could they be like a commoner like him? Senior Han, Squire Zhao, and whatnot, who would want to step on them for no reason. What was the point of living a good life? When he turned his head, he saw Mingzu looking at him with a frown. He just said it casually and didn't realize that the protagonist was sitting beside him. In order to cover up the awkwardness, he raised the wine glass in front of him and gestured to her. "We're leaving tomorrow. This glass of wine is for you." He raised his head and drank it in one gulp. His mouth was full of spiciness without a hint of sweetness. After he swallowed it, he felt like a ball of fire was burning in his stomach. This taste was definitely not grape wine. "You took the wrong glass." Mingzu looked at him and said coldly. Li Yi held on to the table and felt the whole world shake a little. One princess turned into two. Knowing that his alcohol tolerance was poor and that he wouldn't be able to drink this thing in 2 lifetimes, Li Yi never drank the strong alcohol that he brewed himself. When his head was dizzy, Li Xian came over again and said mysteriously, "Let me tell you, that girl from the Wang family is as beautiful as a flower. It's not an exaggeration to say that she's so beautiful that even the birds will be captivated and the flowers will be shameful. She's not any worse than your wife. The Wang family has a good background. The Wang family is one of the top 5 aristocratic families in the Jing kingdom. They only have one precious daughter. If you marry her, you will get unimaginable benefits." "Why? Do you want to consider it?" Li Xian was trying to persuade Li Yi to swap identities with him. He didn't want wealth or glory, nor did he want the beautiful crown princess. He was already sick of being controlled by others. What was worse was that even his favorite research had been banned by his father. The person he envied the most was Li Yi. If he could live his life, he wouldn't hesitate to give up his current position. Although Li Yi was a little dizzy, he was still conscious. He looked at Li Xian with pity. This child must have been suppressed recently. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such unrealistic thoughts. "Drink some water to sober up." Mingzu handed him a bowl of water. "Thank you," Li Yi replied. He was a little dizzy after drinking 1 cup. He had to find a way to increase his alcohol tolerance in the future. He picked up the bowl and drank it in 1 gulp. His stomach felt like it was on fire again. Li Yi's face twisted. He pointed at her. His tears were almost choked by the big mouthful of strong alcohol. "How much more ability do you have?" Mingzu looked at him. The light in her beautiful eyes was unfathomable. Li Xian had already fallen under the table. His eyes were closed, and his mouth was still mumbling non-stop. Li Yi couldn't hear what Mingzu was saying. His head was dizzy. If he didn't have enough alcohol tolerance, it was better not to touch the strong alcohol produced at home. He stood up and walked to his room unsteadily. The things in the room were almost moved out. There was a quilt left on the bed. It would be cold at night if he only covered himself with a quilt. At this time, he couldn't care so much. He fell on the bed and slept. He didn't want to worry about the situation outside anymore. After a long time, he was carried up from the bed in a daze. He smelled the familiar fragrance on Rui's body. He didn't want to open his eyes. He heard her whisper, "Husband, it's cold here. I'll sleep when I go home." Then his body became light. When he woke up the next day, he saw that the bamboo pipe was connected to the outside through the window. He rubbed his head and sat on the bed in a daze. There was no such thing in Rui house. He remembered that after he fell on the bed yesterday, it was now when he woke up. When did he get home? After a while, he thought of something. It seemed Rui had been there yesterday. So, he was carried back by her. After figuring out the reason, Li Yi felt a little embarrassed. Shouldn't this kind of thing be done by men? It was the opposite in his home. The women in the family couldn't be too domineering. Otherwise, it would affect the harmony of the family. When he was thinking about this, Rui had already fetched hot water and walked in. Seeing him sitting on the bed, she said softly, "Husband, you're awake. Wash up first." Seeing her like this, Li Yi threw all his thoughts to the back of his mind. The word domineering should never be used to describe her. He was a little glad that Rui was his sister. If it were Rui, it would be difficult for him to live to the end of his life. He dipped the willow branch in salt to clean his teeth. He rinsed his mouth, soaked his hands and face, rubbed them for a while, rinsed them with water, and dried them. He felt much more refreshed. Rui poured the dirty water outside. Xiao Huan used to do these things. Since Li Yi was injured last time, she did these things more frequently. When she walked to the door, she seemed to think of something and said, "By the way, Aresterly seems to be leaving. Husband, don't you want to go out and see?" When Li Yi walked out of the door, there were already a few carriages parked in front of the courtyard. A few armed men were tying up the goods on the carriages tightly. Shen Liang was also in the crowd. He was much more energetic than the first time they met. The clothes on him were probably worth only a few taels of silver. The woman called Yunyang was holding his arm with a happy look on her face. If Mingzu wanted to return to the capital, it was impossible for her to bring him along. This kind of person would be a pillar of the country if used well. If not, he would be a terrorist. No matter which possibility it was, he had to be firmly controlled by the country. Losing his freedom in exchange for a lot of things. It was hard to say whether it was good or bad. Everyone's choice was different. Looking at the smile on his face, he should be very satisfied with the current situation. A luxurious carriage was parked on the other side of the gate. A slender hand lifted the curtains of the carriage, revealing a face that made Li Yi slightly startled. Mingzu had always been dressed unisex. She was wearing a constable's uniform, just like a man. Li Yi did not see her as a woman from the bottom of his heart. He had seen her in palace attire at the Ningguang residence. However, it was dark at night and he could not see clearly. This was the first time she appeared in front of him in the appearance of a woman. He had to admit that regardless of gender, the appearance of those with the surname Li was not bad. Li Xian, Mingzu, and of course, himself. "Why, do you also want to return to the capital with me?" Seeing that Li Yi kept staring at her, Mingzhu's face showed a rare blush as she looked at him and said, "Have a safe journey." Li Yi gave her his most heartfelt blessing and entered the door in a flash. Bang! The door was slammed shut and the latch was also locked from the inside. "Let's go." Mingzu looked deeply at the closed door and said, "Go." The man on the carriage shook the reins. The carriage slowly started and drove into the distance. "Princess, are you really not going to bring that brat?" In the spacious carriage, the old woman looked at Emingzu and asked in confusion. After a long time, she sighed and said, "Forget it." The old woman nodded and did not say anything else. The carriage returned to silence. Li Yi looked at the carriage disappearing from his sight through the gap in the door and also sighed. If she was not a princess, the two of them could actually become good friends. Unfortunately, there was no if. Chapter 256. By the time Li Yi opened the door, he could no longer see the group of people in the distance. He did not know if he would be able to see them again after today's parting. These days, etiquette was very strict. Girls from rich families would not easily show their faces in public. Li Yi did not believe that the royal family would allow a princess to be a constable for the rest of her life. Although she had said that she would return after the new year, Li Xian had told him that the possibility of that happening was almost negligible. She had returned to the capital this time because of the pressure from the capital. According to Li Xian, the officials in the imperial censorate were about to go crazy. She was a dignified princess, but instead of staying in the palace, she went to a place hundreds of miles away to become a constable. If it weren't for the fact that an imperial censor had accidentally discovered her, everyone would still be in the dark. In the past few days, there were many memorials to the throne. Other than reprimanding the princess, there were other voices. A 17-year-old princess should have been married a few years ago. Even in the past few hundred years, there were not many princesses who got married at such a late age. As a member of the royal family, it was necessary to set an example for the people. If the princess was still unmarried at the age of 17, did she want all the women in the world to follow her example and stay at home as a leftover woman? If all the women married at such a late age, how could the country's population increase? How could the Jing kingdom become powerful? Since ancient times, the imperial censors were not afraid of causing trouble for others, especially for the royal family. With a few words, they could elevate a small matter to the height of politics. If it was not handled well, the etiquette would collapse and the country would not be far from being destroyed. It was obvious that Her Royal Highness was in trouble. Who knew if she would throw a few bombs at the censorate when she returned and send them all to heaven? She could even announce to the public that the heavens did not approve of their behavior and sent down divine punishment. This matter was not for Li Yi to worry about. Her Royal Highness was not someone who would suffer losses. He believed that she would be able to handle it herself. However, she did not bring up the matter of him going to the capital with her. This made Li Yi feel that the farewell banquet was not in vain. After standing at the door for a while, a relaxed expression returned to his face. He shook his head and walked into the courtyard. Everyone had their own lives. This was just an interlude. Life had to go on. He promised Xiao Huan that the next time it snowed, he would make a snowman that looked exactly like her. However, looking at the recent weather, the little servant girl might have to wait for a long time. Even if he couldn't make a snow sculpture, he could still draw a portrait. When she came out just now, he had asked her to wash up, put on her prettiest clothes, and dress herself up carefully. He even asked her to put on the gold and jade hairpin that she was usually reluctant to wear in her hair. Hearing that she could also have such a painting, the young maidservant was overjoyed. She looked forward to it even more than the snowman. After all, the snowman would melt when the weather was clear, but the son-in-law's painting would be preserved forever. Although she really wanted a snowman that looked exactly like her, she would just have to beg the son-in-law the next time it snowed. Xiao Huan stood under a winter-sweet tree in the courtyard. Li Yi picked up the brush and traced on the paper. Rui had just come out to see it. Li Yi felt that he could not favor one and discriminate against the other. After Xiao Huan got the painting, he asked her to call Rui out as well. Why did Mississippi Lu want it? Didn't she already have one? Why did she ask for it? The posture of holding the sword must be imposing, and it would be best if it could be painted with the feeling of a grandmaster. Who knew what a grandmaster looked like? Li Yi now felt more and more that second granduncle had the temperament of a real grandmaster. The more powerful a person was, the more ordinary he looked. For example, the divine monk sweeping the floor could fight two peerless master pros alone as if it was a game. Second granduncle, who was deaf and liked to take advantage of others, could also be a boss-like figure in the martial arts world. Of course, if he painted Mississippi Lou with the temperament of second granduncle, the price would be too high. He might not be able to bear the consequences of doing so. After finishing 3 paintings in a row, his wrist was a little sore. Mississippi Lou was still not satisfied and raised doubts about Li Yi's painting skills. He was too lazy to pay attention to her. It was just that he smashed the snow sculpture that looked more like her last time. Why was she still holding it in her heart and liked to find fault with him? Women were too vengeful. He should not provoke them as much as he could. The weather was good today. Lying on the rocking chair, sunbathing and thinking about things, Xiao Huan ran over and told him that the old storyteller in the brothel was looking for him. Why was old Sun looking for him? Could it be that he encountered some problems in the brothel that he could not solve? Recently, Li Yi had been preparing to discuss some things with him. He did not expect that he would come to him so soon. Old Sun did not come alone. A 15 or 16-year-old youth followed behind him. He was carrying a heavy bag on his shoulder. He was unfamiliar with the unfamiliar environment, so his expression was a little timid. Did the brothel encounter any difficulties? Looking at Old Sun's expression, it did not seem like something serious had happened. Li Yi looked at him and asked. Speaking of the brothel, the old man's face broke into a smile. He said, "Young master, don't worry. The business in the brothel is very good. Yesterday, there were 5 performances, and every one of them was full. It seems that there will only be more people in the next few days." Without waiting for Li Yi to speak again, Old Sun turned around and waved to the youth. He said, "Hurry up and give it to me." The youth hurriedly put down the bag on his back. Old Sun put the coarse cloth bag in front of Li Yi. Li Yi heard a clattering sound, which meant that it was filled with copper coins. The old man said with a smile, "These are the rewards we received yesterday. There are also some silver and jade items that were all exchanged for copper coins. There are 5 strings of coins in total, and this is 3 strings of coins." 3 strings of coins was nothing to the current Li Yi, but this number still surprised him. It was 1,000 coins a day. It was not surprising that Rui Brothel could earn 10 times that amount in a day. After all, the people who went in and out of the shop were all rich people. However, a small brothel could earn 5 strings of coins in a day, and it was just relying on rewards. It looked like he had underestimated the popularity of stage plays in this world. There was still a lot of room for exploration in this industry. It should be known that in the future, the entertainment industry would be a treasure trove of gold. If they could groom a few nationally known stars, they could do nothing but walk around and accept commercial performances, hold concerts, and so on. Wouldn't they earn a lot of money? His thinking seemed to be a little off. The status of actors here was low, and they couldn't be compared to the stars in the future. If he wanted to turn his dreams into reality, he first had to change the hierarchy of this world. Li Yi knew that he didn't have the ability to do that. Thinking about what Old Sun said, he realized another problem. He looked at him and said, "We agreed to split it 40-60. I'll take 40 and you take 60. It should be 2 strings of coins. Remember to take one from here when you go back. Don't make a mistake in the future." Old Sun shook his head. "No mistake. We thought about it and felt that 60% was too much. We don't feel at ease. We will split it like this in the future. Please don't reject it, young master." No one would complain about having too little money, and Old Sun was no exception. The reason why they agreed to split 60-40 was because they didn't know that this thing could be so profitable. They could earn 5 strings of coins in a day. If it was in the past, they wouldn't even be able to earn that much in a month. With a pile of copper coins in front of them, everyone felt at ease. However, if they were to take 60%, they would probably feel uneasy. Everyone knew how the money was earned. If they wanted to continue earning money in the future, they couldn't do without a good story. If they wanted to earn money at ease, they couldn't take the majority. There are people who think they have too much money and give it away. Li Yi looked at Old Sun with a surprised expression. Chapter 257. Old Sun put down the coins and left. As soon as Li Yi invited him in for a cup of tea, he was politely rejected. The 15 or 16-year-old young man followed behind the old man and didn't look back at the coins. Although 3 coins were a lot, they didn't belong to them. There were dozens of coins in his pocket. This was the only large sum of money he had ever held. When the female ghost appeared on the stage, he was responsible for releasing the smoke behind the scenes. This was his wages. When he went back later, he could buy a stick of candied hawthorn on the street. He didn't want to spend the rest of the money to marry a wife. He had wanted to eat candied hawthorn for a long time. He couldn't bear to buy a stick of 5 copper coins, so he bought a stick of 3 copper coins. He ate half of it today and kept the other half for tomorrow. His grandfather said that in a few days, if there was a suitable role, he could also show his face on the stage. His heart was nervous and looking forward to it. In the past, he was only an assistant and had never really stood on the stage to perform. After watching the old man and the young man walk out of the door, after a long time, Li Yi remembered that he still had something to discuss with him. At this time, the old man was already gone, and the matter wasn't that urgent. They could talk about it next time. In the past, he didn't pay much attention to the brothel. It was just a place to kill time in his spare time. Now, he didn't think so anymore. It was a treasure land that was neglected and no one cared about. The internet was still a very distant thing in this era. It would only appear in its embryonic form after hundreds or thousands of years. There were no platforms for ordinary people to discuss, such as Chiba or Weibo. To a large extent, the brothel played such a role. Recently, Li Yi also realized that it was a huge force. It was the source of public opinion and the intersection of all kinds of information. His soul was thousands of years ahead, so he knew how powerful this thing was. Wherever public opinion went, people could kill without leaving a trace. Even raising flags and changing dynasties couldn't avoid this place. It was just that most people didn't realize it yet. The destruction of the Han family was caused by Wu Er and a few storytellers. Rather than saying that Senior Han was killed by his concubine for the sake of his wealth, it would be more accurate to say that he was killed by the evil warding sword manual that didn't exist in the first place. If he had grasped this power in his hands earlier, he would have made his move before the bandits reached Qing and Prefecture. Then he wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. Originally, he was just doing it out of convenience, within the scope of his ability, to help these poor people living at the bottom of society, but he did not expect that it would also bring him a lot of profit. Of course, the most important role was the role that he had neglected in the beginning. For the time being, he had not considered revolting. It was something that he did in passing and did not require much investment. Who knew when it might come in handy? As for how to do it, he had to think about it carefully. After his afternoon nap was disturbed by Old Sun, he didn't feel sleepy at all. He was still lying on the rocking chair with his eyes closed. Without Little Boss by his side, his body and mind were relaxed. Li Yi felt that he was getting lazier. A dull sound of footsteps came from afar. Xiao Huan couldn't make such a sound even if she stamped her feet on the ground. Besides, she wouldn't come to disturb him when he was sunbathing. He didn't need to open his eyes to know that it was Fang. Fong seemed to be in a low mood recently. When asked, he wouldn't say what had happened. He suspected that he had a conflict with his wife at home, but it didn't seem like it. If they had a conflict, it was usually Fong who was whipped by his wife with a broom in her hand. After one night, it was as if nothing had happened. It was like this every time. He didn't know how they reconciled in private. This time was obviously different. Fong walked in front, and Fong's wife followed behind. Both of them didn't look very good. Seeing that the situation was not right, Li Yi immediately sat up from the rocking chair. The situation didn't seem very good. Looking at Fong's wife's expression, could it be that the matter between Fong and Miss Hong in Jade Courtyard was exposed and he was caught in the act? He had already warned him to do things cleanly, but this guy kept saying that he and Miss Hong were innocent. Now he had made a big mistake, hadn't he? Before Li Yi could ask, Fong's wife pointed at Fong and said with a livid face, "Fong the Third, do you still want to live like this?" Fong's face also darkened, and he said, "You're a woman. What do you know? Go home." Fong's wife didn't give in at all. She said, "You have no conscience. We can't live like this anymore." Poor mother and daughter, it was over. It seemed that the matter had been exposed. Was Fong planning to elope with Miss Hong? Or was he going to welcome her back home? Li Yi immediately came to a conclusion in his heart. Fong's face was livid and he didn't speak. Li Yi glared at him, walked to Fong's wife, and said, "Sister-in-law, don't worry. I'll make the decision for you. If he dares to bring Miss Hong home, I'll put him in prison and let him reflect for 10 days to half a month." Miss Hong. Fong's wife was stunned. She looked at Li Yi and asked in confusion, "What Miss Hong?" Fong's face was also livid. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he began to be a little unsteady on his feet. Li Yi looked at the puzzled expression on Fong's wife's face. He looked back at Fong and found that he was winking at him. Li Yi's expression didn't change. He turned back and continued, "Sister-in-law, you don't know this. This Miss Hong is a performer in the brothel. Her singing skills are first class. Fong said that you like to listen to songs, so he must buy Miss Hong and let her sing for you every day. How much money do you think it will cost? How can ordinary people afford it? But don't blame him. After all, he is also kind. If you don't want to buy her, then don't. We're a family, so there's no need to hurt the harmony." Fong's wife's face softened a little, but she still glared at Fong and said, "We only have a few taels of silver at home, and you're so arrogant. You want to buy a performer to sing for you. Is that something we can afford? We need another mouth to feed at home, and there are no extra rooms. You're such a prodigal." Although it was a reprimand, her tone was much softer than before. Fong smiled embarrassedly, tacitly agreeing with what Li Yi had just said. Li Yi also wiped the sweat in his heart. Fortunately, he was quick-witted. Otherwise, he would have to go to Fong's grave every year on this day to burn a few incense sticks and remove the weeds. The misunderstanding was resolved. Fong's wife said that it was fine to go to the brothel to listen to the songs. After all, they were not a rich family and couldn't afford to keep performers. Fong took the initiative to admit his mistake. The couple lived in harmony. If it weren't for Li Yi standing in the middle and ruining their world, the atmosphere would have been even more perfect. Fong put a medium-sized bag in Li Yi's hand, looked at his wife, and said, "We'll take the money that we should take. You can't touch a penny that we shouldn't take. I'll make the decision on this matter. You don't have to worry about it anymore." The woman's lips moved, but she finally nodded and didn't say anything. "What is it?" Li Yi was puzzled by what he heard. Fong looked at him and explained, "This is the share of the Rui Du and liquor. You can take it back, son-in-law. Although it's good to be able to earn money while lying in bed without doing anything, I don't feel at ease with this money. Li Yi opened the bag, and there was a dazzling white light inside. He was a little stunned. What was going on today? Why did everyone line up to give money? Chapter 258. Fong felt that money earned while lying on the bed was not peaceful. Li Yi did not agree with this statement. Earning money while lying on the bed was also a kind of ability. With Fong's physique, he would definitely have a bright future in this industry. Although compared to the future, the overall atmosphere of today's society was more conservative. As long as he stood on the street holding a sign, he would definitely attract many lonely noblewomen who would send their maids to secretly give him an invitation. Finally, he knew why old Fong had been depressed for the past few days. He was purely idle. Do you know why this money is not peaceful for you? Li Yi looked at him and asked. Fong looked up at Li Yi with a confused expression. Have you ever seen second uncle sit under the tree outside and take a nap for the whole day? Li Yi looked at him and asked. Fong nodded. These days, he would occasionally sit under the tree and stare blankly. Second uncle would take a nap for the whole day, and he would stare blankly for the whole day. However, why did the son-in-law ask him this? Have you ever seen Mrs. Su go out early in the morning and come back late at night carrying candied haws? Li Yi continued to ask. Fong nodded again. Although Rui Lu's profits were greater, some women were bored at home and would go out every day to sell candied haws without a break. Have you ever seen the sun rise from the east roof and set from the west roof? Li Yi finally asked. The expression on Fong's face was even more puzzled. He did not know why the son-in-law asked these things, but he still nodded mechanically. This is where your problem lies. Li Yi threw the bag of money to him and said, Why are you looking at things all day instead of working hard? Take the money back and call a few people over later. There's work, and don't think about being idle in the future. Li Yi realized that not everyone could be as carefree and at ease as he was. For people like old Fong, he had to find something for him to do in order to be at peace. The closer it was to the end of the year, the colder the weather became. He lit the stove in the room, but it was still so cold that he couldn't even stretch out his hand. He planned to make a Kong in the kitchen. Almost every house in the northern countryside had this thing. It was usually connected to the bottom of the stove. There was no need to deliberately add firewood to the fire. The heat generated from cooking every day was enough to keep the house warm for an entire day. If there was no warmth before going to bed at night, Grandma would bring a large pile of firewood, straw, or corn stalks from outside. Within a few minutes, her body would be warm. Because of this thing, when he lived in the countryside when he was young, he never had to worry about keeping warm in the winter. He would stay on the Kong for the whole winter, eating and sleeping on it. This situation continued until he graduated from primary school. Ever since he went to middle school and moved from the countryside to the city, he never slept on the Kong again. It was winter and they had nothing to do. The whole family sat on the Kong and played cards to kill time. Fong soon came over with his men. There were more than a dozen families living in the stockade now. All of them stayed by his side in times of crisis. Li Yi didn't treat them badly. He had already given them shares of Rui Du's profits. Recently, he raised the shares of each family a little. These men had been very idle these days. After they moved out of the stockade, they had nothing to do. The candied haws were a small business now. It was run by the family's in-laws and relatives. It was not appropriate for a man to get involved. Taking care of a child at home was not something a man should do. Fong only said that his son-in-law had something to do, and they all came over. It was just a Kong, and 2 or 3 people were enough. With Fong and his men's labor, they could make it today. The kitchen couldn't even accommodate more than a dozen people gathered together. Including Fong, there were 5 people left here. The others went back with a look of regret. Before they left, they even discussed with Fong and his men whether they could change, but Fong firmly refused. "Son-in-law, tell me, what are you going to do this time?" Fong rolled up his sleeves. At this time, even if Li Yi asked him to climb a mountain of swords and plunge into a sea of fire to chop people on the street with a kitchen knife, he would probably do it. There was something to do, money was safe, and the knot in his heart was untied. Fong was revived on the spot. After knowing that the 6 men were busy in the kitchen, Fong's excitement was obviously reduced. He thought that they were going to do something big, but he found that the gap between his ideal and reality was too big. 2 of them went outside to buy bricks and stones, and the rest of them dismantled the original stove. The stove also needed to be changed. It was not easy to make a stove at this time. Xiao Huan was often choking in the kitchen and crying. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't light the fire. Because the ventilation was not good, when she lit the fire, she had to keep pulling the bellows next to her. It was very laborious. When Li Yi was a child, the stove at home was also like this. His favorite thing to do was to go to the stove and help her add firewood and pull the bellows when his grandmother was cooking. Later, when the kitchen was rebuilt, it was changed to the new stove promoted by the state. Without the bellows, the ventilation was better, the ignition was faster, and it saved more materials. However, he couldn't find the feeling of giggling and pulling the bellows hard when he was a child. The Kong should be connected to the stove, which was basically the structure in the countryside at that time. When he was a child, he saw the craftsman build this thing, but when he recalled it now, of course, it was impossible. After finding the drawings, Fong and the others violently dismantled the stove. After cleaning out the garbage, he had already drawn the drawings, including the specific size of each structure. This thing looked simple, but the size couldn't be wrong. If it was a little higher or a little shorter, there would be problems. "Young master, what is this thing?" Fong took the drawings back and forth, but he couldn't see anything. He scratched his head and looked at Li Yi and asked. "As long as you put this thing in your kitchen, Zhuzi won't complain about being cold at night," Li Yi said simply and straightforwardly if he explained too much to Fong. "Okay, I'll do it tomorrow." Fong never doubted Li Yi's words. He heard from his young master that this thing was as warm as summer when he lay on it. At night, he could hug his wife and baby and sleep on this Kong, which was quite beautiful. "Old Sue, it's a deal. Tomorrow, I'll also get this thing for my house. Remember to come and help. If your house also wants to do it, call me." He patted the shoulder of a man next to him and said. When he was dismantling the stove, he wiped the black ash on his hands. Immediately, a big palm print appeared on old Sue's outer shirt. Fong's butt was kicked. The man scolded, "Son of a bitch, this was just washed by my wife. It's not easy to dry clothes in cold weather. When I go back, she will scold me again." Fong patted his butt and was not angry. He laughed and said, "Your wife is spoiled. If she dares to scold me, she will slap her." Old Sue laughed and said, "I don't know who was beaten by his wife with a broom in the yard yesterday. By the way, who is Miss Hong? Why have I never heard you mention her? When did you hook up with her?" Fong's face suddenly turned red as if it was about to drip blood. In old Sue's proud eyes, he kicked him. "Fong Lao San, how dare you hit me? If you say one more word about Miss Hong, I will beat you again." "Okay, I can't beat you. I'll go and ask your wife what is going on with Miss Hong." Old Sue sneered and strode outside. Fong was stunned for a moment. His face changed greatly and he immediately chased after him. His voice came from afar. "Old Sue, brother Sue, don't. Let's talk about it," Xiaohuan mumbled as she walked in from outside. She blinked her big eyes at Li Yi and asked, "Young master, who is Miss Xiaohong?" Before Li Yi could answer, she could only find a familiar figure in her kitchen. It was still fine in the morning. She said in a panic, "How did our kitchen become like this?" Chapter 259. After explaining to the little maid for a long time, she finally believed that her kitchen did not attract evil thieves. Unable to find the money, she tore down the stove to vent her anger. Thinking about it, which stupid thief would look for valuable things in the kitchen? Her private money was all locked in a small box, and even the valuable jewelry bought by the son-in-law was all locked in it, hidden under the small bed in the room. She carried the key with her every day, so it would not be lost. What was more, first miss and second miss were at home, and no thief could come in. She was afraid that if she just sneaked into the house, before she had time to take a breath, Uncle Fong would break her legs and send her to the yamen. The treasure box was under the bed, so it was very safe. But without the stove, where should she cook today? She would not worry about this later, because the son-in-law said that after the new stove was built, it would not be so difficult to light a fire, and it would not always give out smoke, which made her run out several times to cook. It was said that it could also save firewood. Behind the stove, there was a big bed, which could sleep 4 people. The big bed was connected to the stove, so it was warm at any time every day. When there was nothing to do during the day, they could sit on it to keep warm. Xiao Huan imagined the scene of the whole family sleeping on the big bed, and her little face immediately turned red. Ignoring the blushing Xiao Huan who was lost in her thoughts, the little girl just liked to let her imagination run wild. Lao Fong and Lao Su had their arms around each other's shoulders and were playing with the mud outside. They did not look like they were at each other's throats just now. Seeing the flattering expression on his face, Li Yi knew that Fong was finished. His weakness was caught, and his status among the brothers would definitely plummet in the future. There might really be a Miss Hong in the Jade Courtyard, and it seemed that she had known Fong for a long time, even before she knew him. In the past, his family was so poor that they could not eat, so it was impossible for them to know each other through prostitution. But every time he mentioned Miss Hong, Fong would blush and stammer. The relationship between them was definitely not as simple as a pure man and a woman. In any case, this was Fong's family business. Although Li Yi was full of curiosity, he did not say it, and he would not break the casserole to ask. Walking out of the yard, they did not go far before they heard the sound of reading from a small yard next to them. It was Qing Qing teaching the children. A yard in the house was specially made as a school. Originally, there were 2 rooms. After removing the middle wall, there was a big classroom, and the small yard outside was the playground. Although there were not many students to begin with, there were only about 20 girls, and it was enough to occupy 1 room. Mr. Qin, who had broken his leg and could only lie on the bed, said that it would be better for the school to be brighter and more comfortable for the children to sit in. Lao Fong and the others did not hesitate to tear down the wall in the middle. As early as in Willow Leaf Village, Mr. Qin was the teacher of the school. Of course, at that time, only children with the surname Liu were qualified to go to school. During the days when Li Yi was the teacher, under the attraction of Sun Wukong, the number of children from poor families gradually increased. Now, the position of teacher was handed over to Qin Qing. It could be seen that she was very diligent and was born to be a teacher. There were more than 20 children in the big house. As long as they were of the right age, she went to visit their homes and let them go to school. This was a good thing. Children were very naughty. In the past, they ran wild in the village, went into the river to catch crabs, climbed trees to dig out bird nests, and never made people feel at ease. Now that they moved here, they did not have to do these things anymore. The prefectural city was full of crooks and honest people. If they did not let them go out to play, the house would be turned upside down. No parent did not have a headache. Little Qin could help them look after their children, so there was no parent who wouldn't be willing. If the naughty child was playful and didn't want to go to school, they would slap him on the butt and ask if he wanted to go. If he didn't want to go, they would slap him again. After a few more slaps, he would be willing. At first, she thought she was looking for someone to look after the child, but a few days later, when the woman was playing with the money, the naughty child proudly pointed at a pile of copper coins and said that she had lost wrongly. 7 copper coins plus 8 copper coins should be 15 copper coins, not 14. The woman was stunned for a moment and gave the naughty child a good beating. 7 plus 8 was 14. She had remembered it clearly since she was young, so how could it be wrong? Counting his fingers and toes again, he realized that he had counted incorrectly. Surprised, she asked the naughty child when he learned to count. The naughty child teared up and said that it was Mr. Chin who taught him. The woman gave the naughty child a few copper coins and told him to buy some good food. Carrying the gift, she went to Chin Ching's house. They had to thank little Chin. Both she and the child's father were boorish people and didn't know a single word. The pile of copper coins at home could only be counted for fun. If they were asked for specific numbers, they would be dumbfounded. But now, their child had only been in school for a few days and already knew how to count. If he knew a few more words, not only would he not have to take the county examination, even if his family met with a disaster in the future, he wouldn't have to starve to death. There had never been a case of a cultured person starving to death. Generations of people couldn't even read a few words. Their great-grandfather generation only knew how to use a saber to kill. Who would have thought that a cultured person would actually appear here? Their ancestral tombs were really emitting green smoke. The families who had sent their children to school all ran to Chin Ching's house. They were not stingy at all with rice and meat. How could they not bring some gifts? Fong carried a stove and went in. The chimney was made of hollow bamboo and tied tightly together. From then on, this new type of stove had successfully been installed in all the families in the house. The honeycomb briquette was also ready. Uncle Han made a mold and pulled over a few carts of coal powder. Soon, the briquettes with holes on them were piled in front of each family's house. When Li Yi walked into Uncle Han's house, the old man was sitting in the yard, busy. It seemed that he was old and couldn't stay idle. Every time he came to Uncle Han's house, he had work to do. Only second uncle was different. Other than sunbathing and eating, there seemed to be nothing else that could interest him. "Young master, what are you making this time?" Hearing footsteps coming from the yard, Uncle Han raised his head and asked with a smile. He had spent his whole life as a carpenter, but he could only make wooden knives and wooden spears for naughty children. He felt a little regretful. He could only make the best use of his skills in Uncle Han's house. Since he had nothing to do, Uncle Han liked to make those strange things that Uncle Han asked him to make. However, Uncle Han was too polite. He gave money every time and often asked Xiao Huan to send rice and noodles over. The old man was the only one in the house. The silver biscuits hidden under the water tank in the kitchen could not be used up in this lifetime. Li Yi was actually embarrassed to trouble Uncle Han every time. However, Uncle Han was the only one around who had this skill. Besides, it was not easy for him to live alone. He definitely wouldn't want to give money to the old man for no reason. He could only find something for him to do from time to time. When he gave money, he had to have a legitimate reason. Looking at the old man, he smiled and said, "Just some small things." As he said that, he took out the drawing in his arms. Looking at the small squares on it, Uncle Han smiled and said, "Young master, you don't have to worry about it. I can make it in 2 days at most. It's not difficult to make these small squares. It's just that my eyes are not good now. I'm afraid that you have to find a young man with good eyesight to carve the words on it. Uncle Han, you just need to get these small squares out." "I'll find someone else to carve the words," Li Yi said with a smile. Ever since he saw that Li Yi could use a sword to carve words on the wall that were the size of a fingernail, and her speed was so fast that Li Yi couldn't even see it clearly with his eyes, Li Yi felt that the job of carving on mahjong would belong to her. Chapter 260. Men from poor families were all good at everything. Raising pigs and horses, farming, building walls, and building houses, there was nothing they couldn't do. Farming was a skill to make a living. If they didn't have money to hire a craftsman to build a house, they had to do it themselves. This was a skill passed down from generation to generation. Those who didn't learn it would have starved or frozen to death. Fong and the others moved very quickly. In just half a day, the stove and Kong that Li Yi wanted had already appeared in the kitchen. After measuring it, the size was exactly the same as his drawing. There was no problem with the principle. The Kong that had just been made couldn't be burned immediately. Otherwise, it would crack. This problem wouldn't exist after 2 days of drying. The stove and the Kong were connected. Naturally, they couldn't cook during these 2 days. Li Yi originally planned to solve the problem of eating in a restaurant outside. He didn't expect this idea to be opposed by Xiao Huan and Rui. Although his family didn't lack that bit of money, which decent family would go to a restaurant every day to eat? That was something only prodigal sons and prodigals would do. Rui workshop wasn't far from here. The kitchen there didn't lack anything. They had cooked there yesterday. They could just eat in the shop for the next 2 days. Li Yi didn't have any objections. The brothel was just next to Rui workshop. He could discuss things with old man Sun on the way. Fong had already brought a few people to smash his own stove. He didn't even consider the problem of where they were going to eat today. The stove in the son-in-law's house had been smashed. How could his house not be smashed? Those who didn't smash would be fools. Who didn't understand that if they followed in the footsteps of the son-in-law, they would have food to eat and money to earn. They had been living like this for the past few days. Otherwise, they would still be living in the village on the mountain. When Li Yi and his family were preparing to go to Rui workshop, Mrs. Fong was pointing at Fong's nose and scolding. "You're such a glutton. The stove at home is broken. Where are you going to cook today?" Fong's mother-in-law was full of anger. She washed the vegetables and was about to cook, but this guy ran in and smashed the stove. She was almost scared to death. The mother and son in the family relied on this man to survive. If he was crazy or hysterical, she and Juzi would not be able to live. What's wrong with eating at the intoxicated fragrance restaurant for a couple of days? It's not like our family lacks this bit of money. Fong retorted. It would have been better if he didn't say it, but the moment he did, Mrs. Fong got even angrier. Do you feel uneasy with so much money at home, so you're thinking of ways to give it away? This morning, you wanted to buy a perfumer, and now you want to go to Drunken Fragrance restaurant for a meal. You'll have to spend a few taels to eat there. Why don't you take a look at the kind of people who eat there? Sooner or later, the family's savings will be used up by you, Fong retorted again. When Li Yi walked to the door of the house, he saw a broom flying out from the yard of Fong's house. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. One was an iron man who wouldn't frown even if a knife cut his body, and the other was a seemingly virtuous and dignified peasant woman. Suddenly, the dignified and virtuous woman turned into a female tyrannosaurus, and the indomitable man turned into a good-for-nothing. What a sin! Once again, he sighed at his luck. Although when they first met, Rui smashed the solid wooden table in front of him, and he didn't know how much fiercer she was than Mrs. Fong, but for the rest of the time, she was a good housekeeper, a gentle and virtuous ideal wife. Although there was still a veil between them, it was still better than. Thinking of Fong's wailing under the broom, he quickly threw that possibility out of his mind. It was still early, and there was just a touch of white in the east. There were always reasons to get up late in winter. Most people were still sleeping in their warm beds and were unwilling to get up. There were not many people in the tiled houses. Who would come here to watch a show in the early morning? The open brothels were empty, and the doors of the wine shops and tea houses were closed. Only a figure occasionally walked out of the brothels. His footsteps were weak, and he was still thinking about how good the girl's kung fu was last night. In one of the brothels, Sun Yun, who had just turned 15, got up very early. He put the rag in the warm water and quickly wiped the tables and chairs. He needed to wipe the tables and chairs clean before the brothels opened. There couldn't be any dirt on them. Then he boiled the hot water so that he could prepare tea for the customers at any time. He was only wrapped in a thin jacket, but his forehead was covered with fine sweat. The young man's body was not afraid of the cold. After working for an hour, he only felt that his body was steaming hot, and he didn't feel cold at all. He didn't do this work for free. Sister Ruoqing said that if he could get up so early every day and finish wiping the tables and boiling the hot water, she would give him 10 copper coins. She would pay him once a day. Thinking about the dozens of copper coins lying in the small money bag that he secretly hid, he thought that one day he would be able to save enough money to marry a wife. He wouldn't need his old grandfather to worry about him anymore. His heart was full of energy, and the frequency of his hands also increased. He didn't even notice that his grandfather had walked behind him. Old Sun walked over and looked at him lovingly. He said, "Xiao Yun, rest for a while. There are still 2 hours before the brothels open." Sun Yun turned his head and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He grinned, revealing his white teeth. He said, "Grandpa, I'm not tired. I'm almost done. I still have to boil the water later." Then he continued with the work at hand. There were only 2 sets of tables and chairs to be wiped. He could rest for a while when he boiled the water later. Looking at the child's quick movements, Old Sun's old face showed a gratified expression. A diligent child wouldn't starve to death. Even if he were to lie in a coffin one day, Xiao Yun could live on alone. Of course, before he found a wife for his child and settled his marriage, he wouldn't be willing to close his eyes. If he could live to the day he held a great-grandson, he would die with a smile on his face. Looking at the empty brothel, Old Sun's face showed a trace of a smile. It didn't matter that there was no one now. He knew that it wouldn't be long before this place would be full of customers. The painted skin could still be performed for a period of time. When the number of customers gradually decreased, the number of performances of the painted skin would be reduced, and Ying Ning and the Chinese ghost story could officially appear on the stage. With Li around, there would be no shortage of such good stories, and of course, the customers' tips would not be less. As a wandering actor, when did the future become so worth looking forward to? When a person was immersed in beautiful things for too long, he couldn't help but think of some sad things. Yesterday, a brothel outside the city collapsed, and an old friend of many years was crushed under it. Although he wasn't seriously injured, his old bones were probably lying in bed for at least 10 days to half a month before he could get out of bed. He could be considered to have made a name for himself, but there were still countless actors who found it very difficult to live. In the past 2 days, countless old friends had come to him, hoping to make a living here. However, the number of people here was indeed saturated, so Old Sun could only helplessly shake his head and refuse. He had been wandering around for a lifetime, so he could understand the situation of most actors the best. If there was anything he could help them with, he would not hesitate to help. However, he was small and weak. In the big environment, he couldn't change anything at all. Early in the morning, there was not a single customer in the brothel. Only Old Sun was sitting in the corner in a daze. Li Yi walked over. Old Sun heard the footsteps, raised his head, and hurriedly stood up. Li Yi waved his hand and motioned him to sit down. He asked with a smile, "How was business yesterday?" Old Sun smiled and said, "Very good." The reward I received is a little more than the day before yesterday. I haven't had time to send it to you. Yesterday was the second day of the painted skin stage play. Not only did the popularity not decrease, but it also rose. Old Sun had clearly felt that the space in the brothel was not enough. Don't be so anxious. The money will be with you for now. You can pay me once every half a month or once a month. Li Yi didn't come here early in the morning to ask for money. After a few greetings, he went straight to the point and said, "There is something I want to discuss with Old Sunday, just call me Old Sunday." "What's the matter?" "Just tell me," Old Sun said hurriedly. "It's like this. You should have seen that this brothel can't accommodate many customers, so the profit is naturally not much. I want to recruit more actors and build such a brothel in and outside the city. I want to sign a contract with them. I can provide them with stories and scripts. As for how to distribute the profit, you can distribute it according to the proportion like we do, or you can give them a fixed monthly salary." Li Yi looked at Old Sun and said. This wasn't an idea that came to him in the past 2 days. When Li Yi saw the strange culture of the brothel for the first time, he had this idea. What he didn't lack were good stories and scripts. The library contained the essence of thousands of years of culture in Huaxia. It was almost inexhaustible, and he couldn't use it all in his life. After seeing the celebrities who made money so much that their hands cramped, and then looking back at their miserable predecessors, he always felt strange in his heart. Li Yi was very interested in making a small change in this industry. In addition to this reason, he was also happy to see the poor people at the bottom of society live a better life. Many people were intoxicated by their graceful dance and long sleeves. They were the creators of art, but when people appreciated art, they imposed a lot of suffering and humiliation on the creators of art. This was unfair. Of course, there were some reasons that were not known to outsiders. When the entertainment industry in this world began to flourish, the lowly actors became the idols in people's hearts. A name written casually could be sold at a sky-high price. Wherever they went, they could hear the cheers of fans. People knew which actor's dance was the best in the world, and their singing was unparalleled. They didn't know who the emperor of the country was. This kind of scene always brought back some memories in the depths of his heart. Living in this world, both material and spiritual enjoyment were indispensable. When people were no longer hungry, they would pursue a higher level of spiritual pleasure. This could be seen from the painted skin stage play, which was always sold out. This was a huge cake, a cake that had not been noticed by people yet. He had to seize the opportunity before others discovered it. Of course, after recognizing the particularity of the brothel, Li Yi didn't intend to give up the opportunity to control the invisible power in his hands. This world was too unsafe. If he didn't have enough power in his hands, he could be crushed like an ant at any time. In the past few months, the peaceful life in Willow Leaf Village was gone forever. There had been earth-shaking changes. He always felt a little guilty if he still lived as carelessly as before. "Child, what did you just say?" The old man thought that he had heard it wrong, and even his voice was a little trembling. Before Li Yi spoke, he asked again, "Are you willing to accept those poor people who wander around and give them food?" The old man's voice was still a little trembling, for fear that he had misunderstood. Whether those wandering performers could fill their stomachs depended entirely on luck. If they met a generous customer, they wouldn't have to starve for a long time. If the customer only watched the performance and didn't give money, they would have to tighten their belts for the next few days. When did people from Luchi get a fixed salary? Li Yi was a little puzzled as to why the old man had suddenly become so agitated. Since the stage play, Painted Skin, had such good ratings, when A Journey to the West and Legend of the White Snake came out, who knew how shocked these country bumpkins who had never seen the world would be? This was a business that would not lose money at all. It was too ridiculous to rely on other people's money to eat. Some people didn't even need to pay a penny to watch a performance. After watching, they left. No one thought that this method was unreasonable. Each person had one ticket, and they could sit according to the number. It was so simple and convenient. If he wanted to completely change this industry, he couldn't do it overnight. He temporarily suppressed these thoughts and looked at the old man who was staring at him with excited eyes. He said, "What do you think about giving them 500 cents a month?" "That's too much, too much." Old man's son was so excited that his beard trembled. In this industry, it was already a blessing from the heavens to be able to eat their fill. Most people didn't even dare to dream of receiving 500 cents a month. If they didn't do this kind of good thing, they would be kicked in the head by a donkey. You can discuss this with Miss Wan first. You can first call some people to try it out. It's not certain whether it will succeed or not. Remember to choose people who know everything. For now, don't send money over. You guys use my share first. If it's not enough, then we'll talk about it. Old man's son patted his chest and promised, "Don't worry, young master. Leave this matter to me. I will definitely do it properly for you." Old man's son's face turned red. This was a good thing for the many performers in Qing and Prefecture. He was very happy that these people in the same industry could have a meal. Li Yi raised his head and looked at the stage covered by the curtain. There was a look of anticipation in his eyes. This world's first entertainment company was about to take its first step. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.